My name is Jane, and I live with my husband Alex. Alex rarely does any household chores and often treats me as if I'm his maid. I work part-time, trying to balance everything. Hey, could you cook dinner tonight? I asked Alex one evening. He looks at me, confused. Huh? Why? We're short-staffed today, and I might have to work overtime. Can you cook dinner for a change? He scoffs. What are you whining about? I'm the one who brings home the bacon. It's only natural you do all the housework. His tone is dismissive, making me feel small and insignificant. So, I let the matter drop. One day, as I was finishing up some chores, I heard a cheerful voice. Hey there, I'm home. A man walked in energetically. It was my brother-in-law, Mike. Mike? What are you doing here? I asked, surprised. What do you mean? This is my house, he replied, confused. It seemed he mistakenly believed he was at his parents' house, and our conversation felt completely out of sync. Oh, if it's not my folks' place, you should have just told me that, Mike said. I did tell you that, I responded, a bit exasperated. Well, since you're here, make yourself at home, Alex said unexpectedly. Wait, what? Why are you okay with this? I protested, but Alex ignored me, and so Mike stayed with us. From the beginning, it was clear that Mike was an incredibly rude guest. Hey Jane, I'm helping myself to the beer in the fridge, Mike announced one day. What? I was shocked. He acted as if the house were his. When do you plan on leaving? It's already been 3 days, I asked, hoping for a definitive answer. What? It's only been 3 days. Let me stay a bit longer, Mike replied with a nonchalant smile, seemingly oblivious to our discomfort. But that beer is Alex's, I pointed out, feeling my frustration grow. So, why don't you just buy some more? Mike retorted casually. It's not about the beer. I wanted to argue, but it seemed pointless to explain. I ended up staying silent. When is your brother planning to leave? I finally asked Alex, hoping for a resolution. Huh? What do you mean? Mike isn't going anywhere anytime soon, Alex replied, surprising me. What? But he said, I began, realizing Mike had no plans to leave. It turned out he had a falling out with his parents and didn't want to return home. He had mistakenly believed this was his parents' house, but now it seemed he might be playing along. Anyway, where's my beer? Alex interrupted. Well, it's gone. Mike drank it, I replied, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. What? Seriously, just go buy some more. Alex snapped angrily, leaving me no choice but to head out to buy beer. As I prepared to leave, Alex called out, Oh, Jane, while you're out, grab some snacks too. Why can't you buy it yourself? Nah, it's a hassle. It's your job as the housewife, he said dismissively, treating me like a servant. Please, enough is enough. This behavior is disrespectful, and I won't tolerate it. Ha! Are you standing up to me? Mike suddenly took on a threatening demeanor as soon as I challenged him. Look, I'm not trying to overstay my welcome. I'm just crashing here for a bit, okay? But, shut up, no buts, Mike insisted firmly, making me feel overwhelmed by his pressure. Just as I struggled to respond, Alex walked into the room. What's going on? Why are you two arguing? Alex asked, clearly confused. Well, Mike won't leave our house, I explained decently. So what? It's okay if he stays, right bro? Alex replied casually, surprising me. What? I couldn't believe Alex didn't seem bothered by Mike's presence. And he's been drinking your beers, I added, hoping Alex would understand my frustration. You can just buy more, Alex said matter-of-factly. Right, fine, I'll do as you wish, Mike interjected, seeming to acquiesce reluctantly. Exhausted from the argument, I silently agreed to go buy more beer. My passive response seemed to worsen the situation, as Mike's behavior only grew more obnoxious. Hey, beer, Mike's voice echoed as I left the room. Do you really think you'll get a beer talking to me like that? Mike challenged, his tone confrontational. It had been a month since Mike arrived, and he had started treating me like an authoritarian spouse. Well, isn't there a polite way to ask for things? I responded cautiously, hoping to reason with him. Ha! Are you trying to lecture me, just a housewife? Mike belittled me, making his disdain clear. Hey Jane, I'm off to play golf. You two have fun, Alex's voice interrupted from the entrance. Wait, alone with Mike? I protested. Yeah, so what's the problem? Alex shrugged. There's a big problem. Given Mike's behavior lately, it's obvious he might cause trouble. Can't you take him along? He's not into golf. Alex brushed off my concerns, leaving me alone with Mike despite my objections. That's kind of hurtful. So you don't want to hang out with me that much? Mike approached, smirking. But when are you planning to leave this house? It feels like you're treating me like a servant, I retorted, frustrated. Not like. You were my servant, he declared, the words cutting deep. I'm single after all. Always wanted a servant like this. His tone suggested he genuinely believed a housewife was little more than a servant. What a terrible man. I'm not a servant. I'm a proper housewife, I insisted, trying to maintain my dignity. What's the difference? Just bring me some snacks. Hurry up, Mike ordered nonchalantly, lounging in the living room, his entitlement palpable. I ignored him as Mike threw an ashtray. Thankfully, it missed me but shattered the glass on the shelf. Hey, who do you think runs this place? You're getting too cheeky, Mike growled, his anger simmering. Feeling unsafe, I reluctantly fetched him snacks and a new beer. Perfect. This is the life I've always wanted, he exclaimed, reveling in his perceived authority. I feared another outburst if I displeased him, so I waited anxiously for Alex to return. I'm home, Alex finally announced after several hours. Alex, I was so scared, I confess, hoping for his support. Whoa, what happened in here? It's a mess, Alex remarked, more concerned with the room's condition than my distress. Well, Mike threw an ashtray, and I was scared, I tried to explain to Alex. What? It didn't hit you, did it? Then it's no big deal, right? Alex responded casually, shocking me. Would any caring husband react like this if his wife could have been seriously hurt? Hey, welcome home. Your wife trashed the room, Mike interjected, unfairly blaming me for the mess. What? You're the one responsible. Why are you blaming my brother? I protested, frustrated. No, it's not like that. I insisted desperately, but Alex, possibly due to being drunk, refused to listen. He scolded me to clean up and take care of Mike. Dealing with drunk Alex was exhausting. He repeated himself endlessly. Even though I was exhausted, I had no choice but to endure his lectures to avoid more trouble. I'm tired, I sighed, 2 hours after Alex came home. Finally, his lectures were over, but I was completely drained. So, what's for dinner? Alex asked mercilessly. Didn't you eat out? I responded, feeling too tired to even think about cooking. Why would I eat out? You mean you haven't prepared anything? Alex's words cut deep after the 2 hours scolding. How could he expect me to have cooked under those circumstances? Oh, you're so useless. You're really failing as a housewife, Alex continued, dismissing my value as a person. What had I done to deserve this treatment? You're getting scolded. This is hilarious. Mike chuckled from the sidelines, finding amusement in my misery. It seemed tormenting others was a pastime for these brothers. Despite my exhaustion, I ended up cooking for Alex and Mike. They even complained about the food, adding to my despair. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I mustered the courage to confront Alex again. Hey, when is Mike going to leave? He can't stay here forever, can he? Not this again, Alex replied, clearly annoyed. It was clear I had chosen a bad time to bring it up. What's wrong with you? Don't you care about your brother? I challenged, though truthfully, I didn't care. He had invaded our home and made my life unbearable. Living with such a person was pushing me to my limits. You know I've been going through a tough time, right? How can you just ignore that? I confronted Alex, seeking understanding. Everyone deals with stress, Alex responded callously. Mike is particularly stressed, so he takes it out on you. His words baffled me. A punching bag? Me? I asked incredulously. In this house, you're the best candidate for it, Alex replied bluntly. You should feel privileged to be Mike's punching bag. His words stung deeply, rejecting my feelings entirely. I don't want that, I shouted in protest, but Alex dismissed me. It's not about what you want. You're just a punching bag. Punching bags don't have feelings, he asserted coldly. Reflecting on it, Alex had been mistreating me for a while now, yelling without cause, even resorting to physical aggression. You're heartless, I muttered, tears welling up in my eyes. But even as I cried, Alex remained unmoved. Oh, what a bother. Women always think crying will fix everything. Cry all you want. I'm not going to do anything. Now go get me a beer, he ordered, indifferent to my emotions. Once again, it was about the beer. He didn't care about how I felt at all. That was the final straw. I couldn't endure it any longer. I shouted, surprising even myself. Alex looked taken aback but persisted in his verbal assault. Why are you so upset? You have a problem with me and my brother. If you're unhappy here, why don't you just leave? This is my house, so you're the one who should go. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Leave me inside with his brother. Wasn't that the issue? When I sought clarification, Alex simply reiterated, yes, you should leave. That's absurd. Why should Mike stay when he arrived later? He's my brother, okay? And you're just someone who isn't related by blood. Not related by blood? I never imagined my husband, whom I marry for love, would treat me so poorly. Something inside me shattered at his words. What? Are you shocked? If you hate it so much, just go. You can divorce me too. Alex continued to taunt me as I stood there, stunned. Was he really contemplating divorce? It appeared Mike was more important to him than I was. That night, we went to bed in silence, but I couldn't sleep. Alex's cruel words echoed in my mind, haunting me. Leave. Divorce? Was I the only one who believed we were in love? I felt a sudden wave of sadness wash over me. Perhaps my feelings were one-sided. After shedding tears that soaked my pillow, I made a decision and drifted off to sleep. A few days passed since that heartbreaking moment. Alex called me. Hey, where are you? Why did you leave early in the morning? I just noticed. It's been a few days since I last saw you. I didn't care if you noticed. I've been having instant noodles, but I've run out. Make me some food, he demanded. I thought he could survive on instant noodles forever. He sounded flustered, raising his voice. With no other option, I calmly replied, well, I've moved into my own place. What? You're living alone? He sounded genuinely surprised. There was a studio apartment available, so I signed the lease immediately. I'll have movers bring my stuff later. What the hell are you thinking? Make dinner for me and Mike, he demanded sharply. Why should I? You're the one who told me to leave, I retorted firmly, refusing to back down. No, that was Alex tried to assert himself, but his voice wavered as his own words contradicted him. Anyway, come back home. This is a husband's order, he insisted, attempting to assert control. Strangely, though, I no longer felt intimidated by Alex. Why should I come back? There's nothing but unhappiness for me there, I countered. It doesn't matter if it's unpleasant. You're just a servant in this house, Alex retorted, repeating the hurtful term. I wondered if both brothers truly believed I had no rights as a person. Shocked and speechless, I decided to reveal my decision. Alex, you know what? I've decided to take your advice. What? What are you saying? I'm filing for divorce. What? Divorce? He appeared genuinely taken aback. It was odd. Why was he so surprised when he had initiated the topic? Don't be absurd. There's no way I'm getting a divorce. I refuse, he asserted firmly, seemingly unwilling to lose a convenient housekeeper. But his dismissive attitude couldn't shake my resolve. It's because of you and your brother. You've both oppressed me for so long. I've been holding back, I insisted, feeling the weight of my words. Alex's voice began to falter, perhaps realizing the seriousness of the situation. Come on, you're joking, right? Divorce? Seriously, I'll talk to your parents and convince them, he pleaded desperately. What good would that do? I've already spoken to them. They won't listen to you. What? He seemed panicked, realizing the depth of the situation. Maybe he should have just asked his brother to leave and changed his behavior. Please reconsider. My brother says he's sorry, he added, trying to salvage the situation. I thought to myself, these are the kind of people who only show remorse when they're in trouble. Their words of regret meant nothing to me. I couldn't trust them. I'm sorry, but I can't believe anything you say. I won't forget what you've done, and I won't forgive it, I told Alex firmly. His flustered reaction only confirmed my decision. Please wait, I'm begging you, Alex pleaded desperately, but he hadn't taken action when I begged him to address his brother's behavior. The more we talked, the more pitiful Alex appeared. Goodbye. There's nothing left to discuss, I stated, finality in my voice. Wait, let's talk. Look, reconsider the divorce, he urged, grasping at straws. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings through my lawyer, and it was successfully finalized. Alex and his brother ended up in a major argument over household responsibilities, leading to both of them landing in the hospital. After everything they put me through, they got what was coming to them. Now that I'm single, my life is far easier than it was with Alex. I only wish I had left him sooner.
I'm Eliza, a 42-year-old part-time employee, and my life is wonderfully full with my husband and our 2 sons, who are in high school. Our elder son, a senior, is preparing for college entrance exams with hopes of pursuing a career in law, much like his uncle Liam, my brother, who runs his successful law firm. Inspired from a young age by Liam's achievements and dedication, my son aims to emulate his uncle, who encourages him to chase his dreams whenever they meet. Liam, who stepped into a fatherly role for me after we lost our parents early in life, married a woman 10 years his junior. Unlike Liam, who enjoys engaging with our family, his wife tends to keep her distance, rarely visiting our home, which means we seldom see her. This has made it challenging to form a close bond with her, and her consistently somber demeanor often leaves us puzzled, especially during what should be joyful family occasions. Before my marriage, Liam had been a cornerstone of support, and soon after, he followed by marrying his younger fiancé. Initially, we were hopeful about welcoming her into our family, but her reserved and often gloomy presence during their engagement and wedding left my husband and me concerned. Despite our efforts to make her feel included, offering compliments and engaging in conversation, she remained distant, prompting private conversations between my husband and me about her apparent unhappiness. This complex dynamic within our family contrasts starkly with the stability and love in our immediate household, where we nurture our son's ambitions and cherish our time together. As we navigate these family relationships, we continue to support each other, hoping for understanding and connection in the future. Recently, my husband and I visited my brother at his new home, a place so grand it truly showcased his success in the law field. Despite the impressive surroundings, my sister-in-law's absence was noticeably odd, prompting a jest from my husband about her having an abandoned ship. This joke, however, landed awkwardly, only adding tension when my brother explained that his wife was at her parents' home celebrating her mother's birthday. Later, during our visit, my brother, with a straight face, asked us a serious question that took us by surprise. He inquired whether, in a scenario where he couldn't have children, we might consider letting him adopt one of ours. At first, I thought he was joking, but the earnest look in his eyes told another story. While I was stunned and speechless, my husband responded with a lighthearted, "Who knows what the future holds? We can cross that bridge when we get to it if we're all comfortable with it." Despite my husband's casual take, the conversation left a lingering weight on me, intensifying my concerns about the dynamics in my brother's marriage and the profound suggestion of adoption. Over the years, whenever my brother visited, either our home or his, he was always alone, and conversations about his wife became virtually non-existent, her presence slowly fading into the background of our family interactions. This pattern continued until recently, when we celebrated my eldest son's acceptance into his dream law school. During the festivities, my brother revisited the adoption topic, this time with a palpable sense of urgency due to their ongoing struggles with infertility. Once again, my husband responded lightly, suggesting humorously that perhaps my brother might consider our eldest, given his aspirations in law, a field they both are passionate about. While my husband maintained a casual demeanor, I remained deeply thoughtful, considering the significant implications such a decision would entail, not just for us but profoundly for our sons. Navigating this delicate topic requires careful thought and consideration, especially knowing that it involves my brother, someone who has been a pivotal figure in our lives. The concern about how my sister-in-law might treat my sons, who are not her biological children, lingered in my mind. Seeking some peace of mind, I approached my brother delicately to inquire if his wife was agreeable to the idea of adoption. His response, though marked by a wry smile, brought a bit of relief. "Don't fret over her. We've discussed it already," he assured me. While reassured that they had talked it over, I was not ready to make an immediate decision. I decided to involve my sons in the discussion, considering they were in high school and capable of expressing their views. We left the matter open that day. A few days later, the situation took a dramatic turn. I received an urgent call from my brother's lawyer's office informing me that he had collapsed at work and had been rushed to the hospital. In a panic, I hurried to the hospital where the law firm staff, clearly anxious, awaited updates. It turned out my brother had suffered a stroke and was now unconscious. As the law firm staff departed, leaving me alone with my worry, I realized they had been unable to reach my sister-in-law. I tried calling the landline without success and, realizing I didn't have her cell phone number, felt stuck. Soon, my husband and younger son arrived, and it was my son who discovered a smartphone among my brother's belongings. After some effort, we unlocked it and found her contact information. When she finally answered the phone, her initial response was harsh and defensive. "I want you not to call again. I'll take legal action," she snapped. Amidst her tirade, I quickly interjected, "It's Eliza, Liam's sister. My brother has collapsed and is in the hospital." Her tone shifted immediately upon realizing who I was. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I mistook you for someone else." "You said he collapsed?" she asked. After I updated her on his condition and the hospital location, her reaction was unnervingly casual. "I'm unable to come to the hospital right now due to prior commitments. Please keep me informed," she said before ending the call abruptly. Her indifferent response left me puzzled and concerned about her priorities, especially given her husband's serious condition. It became clear she wouldn't be much help, so we resolved to manage on our own. With my eldest son having just completed his university entrance exams and available to assist, we prepared to support my brother through his recovery, navigating this challenging time as a tight-knit family unit. At home, my eldest son took on the duty of visiting my brother at the hospital every day on my behalf. Despite our best efforts, my brother remained unconscious, and his condition was critical. Throughout this tough time, my sister-in-law did not reach out or visit the hospital. Nearly a week after my brother was admitted, I decided to try contacting her again. This time, she picked up quickly, her tone shockingly cheerful. "What's the matter? Is he dead?" she blurted out, showing a complete lack of empathy. Trying to keep my composure, I asked her calmly, "He's still alive. Why haven't you visited him at the hospital?" Her indifferent reply only heightened my frustration. "I'm neither a doctor nor a miracle worker. There's nothing I can do for his recovery," she said dismissively. I was so taken aback by her callousness that I ended the call, my anger hard to contain. This interaction made me start to question the real motives behind my brother's sudden interest in adopting one of my sons. It dawned on me that maybe he was facing the reality of not having children with his wife, hinting at deeper issues in their marriage. Out of curiosity, I asked him how they met after their wedding, and he disclosed that they were introduced through a marriage counseling agency. This revelation stirred a mix of emotions in me, particularly the suspicion that my sister-in-law might have married my brother more for the security his successful law career provided than for love. These thoughts deepened my unease, but when I shared my fears with my husband, his reaction stung even more. He pointed out that if Liam were to pass away in his current state, his entire estate would go to his wife since they had no children. This comment struck me hard, especially as my brother had just celebrated my eldest son's recent achievements and brought up the topic of adoption again. I couldn't shake the feeling that his interest in adoption might be driven more by concerns about his inheritance than genuine familial affection. Feeling powerless and unsure how to proceed, I later casually brought up the adoption discussion with my sons. To my surprise, my younger son was quite enthusiastic about the idea, seeing it as an opportunity for a more secure future under Liam's care. Unlike his brother, he was more relaxed about his future, without clear aspirations like his elder sibling, who looked up to Liam greatly. This unexpected response from my younger son added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation, leaving me with much to consider about the future and well-being of both my sons and my brother. But his response took me by surprise. "I don't want to be adopted," he stated firmly. "As the eldest, it's my responsibility to take care of you, Mom and Dad." His words filled me with pride, yet I couldn't help but feel that my eldest son, with his ambitions to become a lawyer, was actually the more suitable candidate for adoption. Although part of me wanted to proceed with the adoption of my now unconscious brother, various circumstances thwarted these efforts. Despite not wanting any part of my brother's inheritance for myself, The thought of my sister-in-law, who seemed almost eager for his demise, inheriting everything, was unbearable. All I could cling to was hope for my brother's recovery, a hope that was shattered when he passed away a few days later. It then fell upon me to inform my sister-in-law of his death. "Can we arrange a funeral?" I asked when I called her with the somber news. Her response was unexpectedly cheerful. "You have the final say. Just please don't involve me in any formalities," she said, ending the call abruptly. Overwhelmed with frustration but holding back my emotions, my husband and I took the lead in organizing the funeral, supported by the law firm's staff. While my husband voiced concerns about the future of the firm, my brother ensured its continuity by appointing a competent individual to manage it, allowing the firm to operate smoothly as a corporation. The funeral was a significant event, attended by a multitude of mourners, which included presidents of major corporations, politicians, and other dignitaries. This massive turnout was a testament to the profound impact my brother had on many lives. As the ceremony unfolded, I couldn't help but marvel at what an incredible person my brother had been. My son helped throughout the proceedings, but his mood shifted as he noticed the influential figures paying their respects. "I should have been the one adopted," he lamented bitterly, realizing just how remarkable his uncle truly was. My husband and I shared in his sorrow, understanding the weight of his realization. Throughout the funeral, where I served as a pallbearer, no one mentioned the absence of my sister-in-law, nor was it a topic of conversation. It struck me that possibly many were not even aware of my brother's marital status. They hadn't had a wedding ceremony, only a honeymoon. Reflecting on this, I harbored regrets. If only they hadn't married, we wouldn't be in a situation where a wife failed to show up at her husband's funeral. As we concluded the funeral for my brother, I found myself regretting not having allowed him to adopt my younger son sooner, especially with the fear that my sister-in-law might attempt to take control of his considerable estate. In an effort to unite everyone after such a solemn event, I invited the attendees to gather at my brother's house for a meal. "Thanks to all of you, my brother can now rest in peace," I announced, my voice heavy with sorrow. Amidst our shared mourning, my sister-in-law made an unexpected appearance, clad in a flashy pink coat, as if her timing was choreographed with the funeral's end. Surprised and suspicious, I confronted her. "Why have you chosen this moment to come?" She responded with a wide grin, loudly proclaiming for all to hear, "As my husband's wife, I inherit his $95 million estate along with his house. With no children in the picture, everything belongs to me." Her declaration triggered laughter from some of my brother's colleagues, which seemed puzzling until one of them interjected, revealing a shocking truth. "We're aware that you're officially divorced." Stunned, I blurted out, "You were divorced?" I couldn't believe that she was no longer legally connected to my brother the day before his sudden collapse. Her face turned cold as she met the eyes of those who revealed the truth, her anger barely contained. Another lawyer added fuel to the fire. "I've also heard you were ordered to pay alimony because of the affair that led to your divorce." Furious, she retorted, "I'm not obligated to pay alimony anymore. There's no one left to pay." However, she was quickly corrected by a legal expert. "The right to alimony transfers upon inheritance, so you'll still owe it to Eliza, the sole inheritor." That was the moment it hit me. With their divorce finalized and our parents gone, I was the last remaining family member, the sole inheritor of my brother's estate. Realizing her position, her demeanor shifted from defiance to dismay as she locked eyes with me, prompting me to take a step back. Yet she remained confrontational. "Don't I deserve half of the estate now that the divorce is settled?" A lawyer, looking with dismay, countered, "Didn't Liam provide you with funds upon the finalization of the divorce?" "I have the receipt certificate." Another chimed in. "He also acquired a house before the marriage, so it isn't subject to property division." Despite the tense atmosphere, she recalled another potential asset with a slight chuckle. "There's still the life insurance. I should be the beneficiary." Her resilience was notable, even as she navigated through this hostile environment. But as she smirked, adding, "I changed the beneficiary of Liam's life insurance to myself." A lawyer promptly disputed her claim. "Liam was resolute, so it's likely he made that change upon finalizing the divorce." Later, as I sifted through my brother's belongings, I found the life insurance policy. However, before I could examine it, my sister-in-law saw it and swiftly snatched the document from my hands. Her impatience was evident as she scrutinized the beneficiary, desperate to find her name there. My sister-in-law's demeanor quickly changed to one of disappointment as she handed back the certificate to me, her shoulders drooping. It was at that moment I realized I was the beneficiary, rendering her efforts useless. Frustrated, she openly shared her true feelings. I married a lawyer thinking he was wealthy, but all I got was a tiny inheritance, and now I have to manage with little alimony. It's a huge mistake. The lawyer present hardened his expression in response, recalling that Liam had expressed similar regrets about consulting a marriage counselor, a decision he deeply regretted. Although my brother never shared these feelings with me directly, his reputation for honesty was well recognized among his peers. Over time, burdened by the need to pay alimony without stable work, my sister-in-law frantically looked for job opportunities. Her lack of dedication resulted in a series of brief employments. In a desperate attempt to secure a quick fortune, she approached a marriage counseling agency aiming to entice a wealthy individual with promises of a profitable marriage. She exploited his trust, but her plan quickly fell apart when he saw through her deceit and reported her for marriage fraud. She was arrested, facing the reality of her schemes. Meanwhile, the lawyer from my brother's firm clarified that no alimony had ever been paid to me. In May, he updated me that with her arrest, any chance of receiving alimony was unlikely. Yet, my main concern wasn't the money. I wanted her to face the repercussions of her actions and suffer the fate she deserved. I was confident my brother would agree, which is why I hoped for a thorough police investigation into her other wrongdoings and for her to be charged and brought to justice. In these events, my family moved into a spacious house left by my brother, a sharp contrast to our previous cramped apartment. The move thrilled my husband and sons. Inspired by the events, my eldest son dove into his law studies with renewed zeal, motivated by the work ethic he observed in my brother's colleagues. He hoped to continue my brother's legacy and excel in law. However, my younger son felt a pang of disappointment upon learning I had inherited my brother's entire estate. "I wish I had been adopted by uncle, so I could have inherited everything," he said half-jokingly, yet his smile hinted at a genuine desire. My name is and contrary to what you might expect, I'm not the archetypal high-powered executive strutting around in designer heels. Although my father is a prominent figure in the business world with a company so massive it almost has its zip code, and despite my pricey education, I've always been more comfortable in a simple cubicle than a luxurious corner office. My family isn't thrilled about it. They envisioned a different path for me. My brother Lien is the family's shining star, groomed to take over our father's empire, while I've made it clear that the corporate throne is not my destiny. I'd rather avoid the drama and pressure of leadership. Then there's Cannon. Imagine this. I'm out trying to relax with friends at a rundown bar when Cannon walks in, tray in hand and a smile that stops you in your tracks. He might be just a waiter, but there's something about him that's refreshingly genuine. His simplicity and outlook on life felt like a breath of fresh air. We started talking, and soon it became clear that we clicked. Our interests, hobbies, and perspectives aligned perfectly. When my parents learned about Cannon, they couldn't hide their amusement. A waiter? They would chuckle as if I'd brought home a creature from another planet. They saw him as just a casual fling, but for me, it was serious. "He's real. He understands me," I would argue, frustrated by their narrow views. My dad wasn't pleased either, criticizing my choice to play house with a boy who serves drinks. But Cannon was different. He wasn't about chasing money or status. He was about genuinely living life, which was exactly what I wanted. I stood firm, telling my parents, I love him. He's not caught up in all this, gesturing to the heavy expectations that hung over our family. They might have thought it was just a phase, but I knew better. Cannon proposed in his typical straightforward manner. No dramatic gestures, just an honest, "Marry me?" And it took me a moment, but then it all made sense. "Yes, let's do it," I found myself saying, ready to commit to the man who may have served drinks for a living but had captured my heart completely. From the marriage meeting, it was a whirlwind. We didn't even bring him home before we decided to tie the knot. It might sound impulsive, but it felt right, just moving forward together, no looking back. The wedding was modest, with only close family present. My father, a titan of industry, watched in disbelief as his daughter married a waiter in a ceremony that probably cost less than one of his typical business lunches. But to me, it was perfect, simple, genuine, and true to who we are. But here's the truth. Despite how much my dad looked like he wanted to be anywhere else during the wedding, he showed up when it mattered. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside. With his characteristic roughness, he managed up congratulations, and it wasn't the warm embrace I had hoped for, but coming from him, it held weight. So there we were, Cannon and I, officially married against all odds, our union a small rebellion founded on love and a sprinkle of defiance. Our quaint apartment quickly exposed the realities of everyday life. To me, the space felt snug and homely, but for Cannon, it was a surprising shift. One evening, as we navigated our cramped kitchen, I tried to find out his true thoughts about our new living arrangement. "So, you're really okay with this place? It's a bit different from what you were expecting, right?" Cannon paused, his attempt at a smile, not quite hiding his hesitation. "Yeah, it's snug. I didn't expect a palace, but it's fine. It's got character," he remarked, though his words seemed to carry a heavier load of unspoken thoughts. Tensions around domestic chores began to surface early on. Cannon's reluctance to engage in household duties became a frequent sore point. He wasn't overwhelmed with work. His part-time job afforded him plenty of free time. "Cannon, the dishes are piling up. Can you help out a bit?" I asked one night, my voice tinged with fatigue. Come on, and you know I'm all thumbs with this stuff. "Can't we just get takeout or something?" he responded, his once charming grin wearing thin. The topic of career progression, or my deliberate avoidance of it, became a recurring issue. Cannon couldn't grasp my choice to stay in a non-leadership role at my father's company. "Babe, you've got to think about the future. When are you planning to step up at work? There's so much potential for you there," he pressed, his frustration mounting. I sighed, the conversation too familiar. "Cannon, we've talked about this. I'm happy where I am. I don't need a title to find fulfillment." But Cannon persisted, "That's just it, and you could have both the title and the happiness. You're not seeing the big picture," his patience fading. Our talks grew more strained, and one particularly harsh exchange left a lasting scar on our relationship. "Understand that I'm not driven by the same things as you. I don't measure my worth by a job title or a fat paycheck," I tried to explain, seeking some understanding. Cannon's face showed disbelief and frustration. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And you're sitting on a gold mine of opportunity, and you're too blind to see it," he blurted out, his words slicing deeply. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm blind? Stupid?" I retorted, the pain evident in my voice. "No, and I just think you could do so much more," Cannon replied, his tone softer. But the damage was already done. Our once peaceful home turned into a battleground of ideals and expectations. The man I had married, who once shared my dreams of simplicity and genuine connection, seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone I hardly recognized. The days were long and draining, and I found myself longing for nothing more than to kick off my shoes and collapse on the couch, escaping the growing divide between us. But it seemed the universe had its twist in store for me. As soon as I stepped into our apartment, my heart dropped. Water was everywhere. The neighbors upstairs had somehow turned their mishap with indoor plumbing into an impromptu water feature, transforming our modest living space into a makeshift pool. With a deep sigh, I called my parents, my voice shaky, as I relayed the soggy disaster at hand. After a tense pause, a silence that felt thick with unspoken thoughts, my dad's voice finally came through, softer and warmer than usual. Of course you both can stay here. We'd be glad to have you. I could nearly see the reluctant smile in his tone. It was a relief, certainly, but it also signaled the beginning of an awkward chapter. Moving in with my parents as a newlywed was not how I pictured the start of married life with Canon. Yet that was our new reality about to unfold. While it was comforting to have a roof over our heads, the dread of how this temporary arrangement might affect our relationship loomed large. My parents' mansion was worlds apart from our humble apartment, both in size and spirit. I wondered how Canon would adapt to this new luxury and what it might mean for our future together. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I began packing for what I hoped would be a short stay. Canon was skeptical. "Your parents' place? That's our best option," he groaned while we packed, his tone mixing disbelief with annoyance. "Yeah, really? Unless you're hiding a luxury condo somewhere," I replied, trying to inject some lightness into the situation. He didn't respond, just continued packing in silence, his thoughts on independence and pride barely concealed. The moment we stepped into the mansion, I felt Canon stiffen. The opulence of my childhood home had never really affected me, but through Canon's eyes, it was as if we'd landed on a different planet. "Wow. Just wow," Canon murmured, his usual confidence diminishing slightly with each step. Surprisingly, it was my dad who attempted to break the ice first. "Welcome. Make yourselves at home," he said, his smile more formal than inviting. Canon managed a tight-lipped smile in return. The first few days were stiff and uncomfortable. Canon seemed lost, wandering the halls like a tourist, while I tried to manage the sudden shift in our dynamics. Canon's frustration eventually found its voice during dinner one evening. "So, when do I get the grand tour of the family biz? Maybe find a little corner office for me," he joked, though the underlying tension was palpable to everyone, especially my dad, who nearly choked on his drink, laughing it off before responding. "The company's son? It takes more than ambition. It takes years of training and the right background," he stated pointedly, his words both polite and decisively dismissive. Canon's face turned a shade of deep red, a mix of embarrassment and irritation evident. "Right, of course, silly me," he muttered, pushing his food around his plate. Later, in the privacy of our temporary room, Canon's frustration boiled over. "Can you believe him? The right background. What's that supposed to mean?" he fumed, pacing back and forth. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm the storm. "Canon, you know how my dad is." "He didn't mean," I started, but Canon cut me off. "Didn't mean what, Anne? That I'm not good enough?" "Because that's exactly how it sounded," he said, his anger cresting. The chasm between his world and mine had never felt so wide, and as I watched him pace, I realized just how much we'd have to overcome to bridge it. Life wasn't just about meeting standards, it was about dealing with his unique approach. "Hang in there, we're not at the end yet. We'll find a way," I reassured him, attempting to ease the palpable tension. As I reached for his hand, he pulled back gently, his initial anger giving way to a deeper, more vulnerable hurt. "It's really difficult, you know? I always feel like an outsider, even when I'm right here with you," he confessed. Our conversation lingered unresolved, echoing the growing rift between our different realities. Canon struggled to navigate the silent expectations of my family and the unresolved issues that loomed between us. It was like a precarious mix, volatile and unpredictable. In our apartment, life seemed to momentarily regain its rhythm, or at least that's what I thought. However, as weeks unfolded into months, Canon's presence dwindled, his absences grew longer, and our home began to feel more like an abandoned place marked by the remnants of his chaotic mornings and late nights, strewn with dirty laundry, neglected dishes, and the echoing silence of missed dialogues. Whenever I questioned him, he always had the same excuse: "Work's overwhelming. You know how it goes." But I felt there was something else keeping him away. Feeling more alone than ever, I reached out to Raiden, an old family friend and head of security at my dad's firm. To me, Raiden was akin to an uncle, always ready to offer advice or lend a hand. "Raiden, I'm worried about Canon. Can you watch over him for a bit? Something doesn't seem right," I asked, my voice heavy with concern. And, you know I'm here for you. It's taken care of, Raiden assured me, his tone serious yet comforting. Raiden's investigation soon brought devastating news. Cannon wasn't just tied up at work. He was involved in an affair. The woman, a fixture of wealth often seen near Cannon at his workplace, embodied the opulence I had always steered clear of. The irony of it all was bitter. Cannon, who once found my modest lifestyle endearing, was now enchanted by someone whose life screamed of the luxury I had avoided. With irrefutable evidence in hand, I confronted Cannon. Upon seeing the photos, his facade fell away, revealing defiance and contempt. So what? Yes, she's driven, youthful, stunning, everything you are not, he retorted harshly, his words striking me like a venom-laced dart. The immediate sharp pain was a harsh contrast to the gradual, numbing realization that the man I once loved, the man I married, was now a stranger. I want a divorce, I stated clearly, the words bitter in my mouth. It was a definitive statement, not a question nor a plea. Cannon's mocking laughter ceased, replaced by a quiet nod of resignation. Fine, he agreed simply, and just like that, our marriage was over. The divorce unfolded in a haze, defined by signatures and quiet meals, each of us ensconced in our solemn thoughts. When everything was finalized, Cannon departed, taking the last vestiges of our shared existence and leaving behind a deep void filled with betrayal and sorrow. Upon disclosing the divorce to my parents, their reaction was tinged more with relief than sorrow. We never understood what you saw in him, my father confessed, barely concealing his relief after my marriage. It was over, but deep down I knew they were right. The distance between Cannon and me had grown too vast, a reality that became excruciatingly clear by the end. Cannon, ever relentless, kept returning with new aliases, spouting the same tired lines. It was then I knew it was time for a replay of the past. I reached out to Raiden, our head of security. Raiden, it's showtime again. Can you keep an eye on Cannon? I suspect he's all talk and no substance. Raiden agreed immediately, no questions asked. The report he later handed me was both amusing and enlightening. Cannon, living the high life? More like a facade of grandeur. His supposedly extravagant lifestyle was nothing but smoke and mirrors. The luxury cars were rented, and the lavish vacations were charged to his new wife's dime. Going through the report, I couldn't help but chuckle. Cannon was the same as ever, chasing after the shiny and superficial, mistaking it for treasure. Flipping through the pages, each one confirmed that leaving him was the right decision. The Cannon I thought I knew was nothing more than an illusion, and I was done wandering in that mirage. I sat back, tossing the report about Cannon's glamorous life aside, and smiled, not because of his downfall, but because I was in command of my narrative, clear on my direction. Weeks later, at a networking event essential to my role as a CEO, I spotted Cannon. There he was, arm in arm with his new wife, playing the part of a man who had moved on to supposedly better things. He never missed a chance to boast. As they passed, he nudged his wife and pointed at me, loud enough for me to overhear. That's my ex-wife over there. She never really made much of herself. His wife giggled, a sound that echoed sharply across the room. It stung, but only momentarily. I was about to leave the conversation behind when an older gentleman approached, his face flushed with indignation. "Young man, how dare you speak of and in that manner," he bellowed, drawing attention from nearby attendees. "Do you realize who she is? She's the CEO of her father's company, highly successful, and a potential investor for us." Cannon's confident demeanor drained away, and his smirk was replaced by a stunned expression. He struggled to speak, but no coherent words came out. His wife, previously amused, now appeared mortified, absorbing her father's scolding. Seizing the moment, I decided to deepen Cannon's embarrassment. "You know, he wasn't just seeing you when we had our problems," I told her calmly. "There were others, and it seems his old habits persist." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo Raiden had taken, depicting Cannon close with another woman, clearly not his wife. Her reaction was immediate, Her expression crumbled into a mix of hurt and fury. "You're lying," she shrieked at me, but a glance at Cannon's face confirmed her fears. What followed was chaotic, a frenzy of shouting and accusations, as Cannon scrambled to placate his irate wife. The unfolding scene was a spectacle of his making, and as I walked away, I felt the weight of that chapter fully close behind me. At the gathering, I caught myself smiling as I discreetly observed the attendees attempting not to gawk too openly. Turning on my heel, I walked away, reflecting on how Cannon's life was coming apart. While I found no pleasure in his distress, there was an undeniable sense of poetic justice in witnessing karma unfold. Since our last encounter, I had evolved, becoming more resilient and successful than Cannon could have ever envisioned. Following the debacle at the event, Cannon's reputation plummeted. His wife, having had enough of his infidelities, ended their marriage. The extravagant life he once boasted about quickly crumbled as his father-in-law repossessed the luxurious car and upscale apartment Cannon was so proud of. His high society friends disappeared faster than a wisp of smoke, leaving him isolated and struggling. The last I heard, he was back to waiting tables, buried under a mountain of debt accumulated from maintaining a facade of prosperity. Reflecting on the past, I recalled how Cannon had ridiculed my modest lifestyle and aspirations. Now, he was the one hustling to make ends meet, a stark contrast to his earlier arrogance. While I harbored no ill wishes towards him, part of me felt this was an inevitable reckoning. Amidst this turmoil, something remarkable happened. I met someone new. Let's call him Jack. Jack is the antithesis of Cannon, grounded, unpretentious, and values sincerity, hard work, and genuine laughter over a simple cup of coffee. Jack and I connected instantly, with no pretenses, just two people relishing each other's presence and appreciating the simpler pleasures of life. It's refreshing to be with someone who understands the importance of authenticity, not needing the dazzle of glamour to feel significant. This turn of events has shown me that life tends to come full circle. I've weathered numerous challenges, overcome betrayals, and emerged stronger. Meeting Jack and witnessing Cannon's downfall has been part of this incredible journey. It feels as though I've turned the page on a painful chapter and embarked on a new one brimming with hope and genuine contentment. At 32, my life was mundane, defined by a dreary office job at a large company where I was trapped in a cubicle, surrounded by endless spreadsheets and business jargon. Lunchtimes were solitary events, spent nibbling on a lackluster salad while staring at my computer screen. My dating history was as underwhelming as a blank canvas. I simply didn't stand out. Clad in various shades of beige, from my clothes to my hair, my personality seemed equally muted. One day, my cubicle neighbor, Margot, swiveled her chair towards me with a mischievous look. Margot was everything I was not. Vibrant, with bright red lipstick and a boisterous laugh, always surrounded by office gossip. "Genesis," she began in a hushed tone. "Guess what? There's a guy who's interested in you." My head snapped up in shock. Margot, grinning, informed me that this admirer often saw me at our favorite little French cafe. I was incredulous. Someone had noticed me there, amidst my weekly escape from the monotony, where I indulged in overpriced coffee and daydreamed of romantic comedies. Who? How does he even know I exist? I asked, puzzled. Margot shrugged, mentioning he was a bit shy but had been watching me. The following Friday, with Margot's information, I was on edge with anticipation. As I was about to lose hope, a tall man with messy black hair and a confident demeanor entered. Our eyes met, and he walked directly towards me, his smirk turning into a genuine smile as he approached. "Hey," I managed to say, my voice faltering like that of a nervous teenager on a first date. "Hey there," he replied warmly. "You're the girl from the corner table, right? I see you here all the time." We exchanged a few words, and he soon asked if I'd like to join him for coffee elsewhere. Excited and slightly nervous, I agreed. That Saturday, he took me to a vibrant record store downtown, a treasure trove of music from all genres. Elias, as I learned his name, expertly sifted through the records, sharing his passion for music. He handed me a Miles Davis album. "Absolute masterpiece," he declared. I listened, intrigued, as he discussed the music. Margot watched us with a knowing smile when we returned to the office, her earlier prediction confirmed. Thanks to her, my life began to shed its beige tones, filling instead with the colors and sounds of new experiences and a budding romance. I felt a twinge of insecurity as Elias handed me a Miles Davis record. I wasn't much of a jazz enthusiast. His laughter was warm and comforting as he reassured me, "No worries, everyone's got to start somewhere. Maybe I can introduce you to the good stuff." As the hours slipped by amidst music trivia and shared chuckles, I discovered that Elias, beneath his poised exterior, was quite the character. He cracked awful jokes and recited lines from cheesy 80s films with an earnestness that had me laughing until tears came. Strolling back to my car, the air filled with an easy silence. It was clear this wasn't just any coffee outing. There was a genuine spark, a connection that felt deeper than common interests or clever banter. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, Elias surprised me with a fancy dinner date that took an unexpected turn. As he knelt with a simple yet stunning diamond necklace, I found myself tearfully accepting his proposal. "Marry me, Genesis," he said, emotion heavy in his voice, "and let's paint our lives with every color imaginable." Weeks later, Elias suggested I meet his parents. The thought sent a wave of nerves through me, but his comforting grip on my hand reassured me. "Don't worry, they'll love you," he whispered. His parents, Bailey and Lincoln, welcomed me with open arms into their quaint suburban home. Bailey's warm hug and Lincoln's firm handshake made me feel immediately part of the family. The evening was filled with engaging conversations and laughter, ending with me feeling less like an outsider and more like I truly belonged. Afterward, as Elias and I headed to my car, he playfully asked, "So, when do you think we should make this official?" My laughter was carefree. "How about next summer's?" His grin was wide. "Sounds perfect, Mrs. Elias Thompson. That has a nice necklace to it, doesn't it?" Our wedding was a small, intimate gathering. My father, a successful businessman, couldn't hide his pride as he walked me down the aisle. The simple yet elegant dress I wore seemed just right, reflecting the newfound confidence and joy in my eyes. That evening, I posted a photo in my wedding dress with a caption that read, "Happily ever after begins." Married life was delightful. Sweet moments and romantic getaways planned by Elias and cozy evenings spent watching Netflix. Life was bliss until Elias suggested a significant change, moving in with his parents. This new chapter promised to be as challenging as it was exciting, yet with Elias by my side, I felt ready for whatever came our way. Elias looked worried as he spoke about his parents getting older. "They could use our help around the house," he said, his face reflecting genuine concern. Understanding his close bond with his parents and having grown fond of Bailey and Lincoln myself, I agreed without hesitation. They greeted us with warm smiles and freshly baked cookies, making the house feel instantly brighter with our presence. A few weeks into our stay, Sunday dinner conversation took a sharp turn. We discussed the house's deteriorating condition, a roof that looked like a patchwork quilt, peeling paint, and dubious electrical wiring. "Don't worry, Dad," Elias reassured as he helped himself to more dinner. "We'll get it all sorted." I gave him a worried look. Our savings weren't exactly robust, but the thought of his parents living in such a state was unsettling. Bailey, overcome with emotion, started to cry. "Oh, Elias, you shouldn't have to worry about this," she sobbed. "This old house has seen better days, but we don't want to burden you too." The guilt was palpable. They were such kind-hearted people. The thought of them in these conditions was heartbreaking. Later that night, tucked in bed, I broached the topic of the house repairs. "Maybe we could use some of our savings for the repairs?" I suggested tentatively. Elias's face lit up. "Bingo! Those leaky pipes aren't going to fix themselves. We agreed to share the renovation costs, feeling like responsible adults stepping up to the challenge. The following weeks were a whirlwind of contractors, paint samples, and countless trips to the home improvement store. Bailey and Lincoln couldn't thank us enough, their gratitude evident as the house transformed from drab to delightful. 7 months later, the house was unrecognizable. Shiny new appliances in the kitchen, a leak-proof roof, and a completely refreshed interior. They even threw a big celebration party with a lavish spread. However, amidst the festivities, Bailey burst into tears. I rushed to her side, anxiety twisting in my gut. "What's wrong, Bailey?" I asked, dabbing at her running mascara. "Oh, honey," she sniffled, gripping my hand. "We're so happy with the house." But her words trailed off as she glanced towards Lincoln and Elias, who mumbled an excuse and stepped outside. "But what, Bailey?" I urged gently, taking a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears again. "We might lose the house, honey. They're going to take it away." My heart sank. Lose the house? After all this work? Why? What happened? Bailey glanced towards the doorway where the men had disappeared. "We took a big loan, a huge one, to fix up the place, and now it's due," she whispered, her voice heavy with worry. My stomach dropped. "How much?" $350,000, honey, she sighed, "and we have to pay it back in the next 3 months. The news hit like a cold wave. They had mentioned taking out a loan. Confusion mixed with a rising tide of anger and worry as I struggled to process the magnitude of the situation. The joy of the evening dimmed, overshadowed by the looming financial crisis. The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Bailey and Lincoln had accumulated a massive amount of debt, keeping it all under wraps, and now it seemed they were looking to me for a bailout. Despite my frustration, seeing Bailey's tear-stained face softened my resolve. "I'm so sorry, Bailey," I said, my voice constricted with emotion. "But I don't have that kind of money. There's nothing I can do." Just then, Elias and Lincoln re-entered the room, both wearing sheepish expressions. "There might be something you can do, Genesis," Elias began hesitantly, his eyes avoiding mine. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Like what?" I asked cautiously. Elias swallowed, his voice tinged with desperation. "Well, your dad's pretty successful, right? Maybe you could ask him about a loan." The suggestion felt like a manipulation, but Bailey's tearful gaze was hard to ignore. With a heavy heart, I agreed to speak to my father, though I made no promises. The next day, I called my dad, apprehensive about the conversation. He listened silently as I explained the situation, his pause stretching into an agonizing silence. Finally, he spoke, his tone grave. "All right, Genesis, I'll lend you the money, but on one condition. It must be a formal loan with a signed receipt. That way, if necessary, I can reclaim the funds." Relaying this to Elias, I saw his reluctance at the idea of a receipt, but necessity won out, and he agreed. With my father's assistance, the debt was cleared, and Bailey and Lincoln were effusive in their gratitude, treating me like a hero. Despite the relief of resolving the crisis, a simmering resentment lingered within me. This bitterness only deepened with the sudden, devastating loss of my father to a heart attack. The days that followed were a haze of grief, arranging the funeral amid a stream of condolences that felt as hollow as the silence his absence left in our home. One afternoon, emotionally drained from funeral preparations, I arrived at my in-laws' house earlier than expected. The front door creaked as I entered, a noise catching my attention. Muted voices came from the living room: Bailey, Lincoln, and Elias. Curiosity piqued, but with a sense of guilt about eavesdropping, I hesitated near the doorway. "Can you believe it?" Lincoln's voice carried a chilling note of satisfaction. $350,000, and we're practically debt-free thanks to her old man. Bailey's laugh was devoid of any warmth. "Stupid girl, that Genesis. She never suspected a thing." My heart raced with a mix of shock and fury. Their words, cold and calculating, were a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. But the conversation took an even darker turn. "Can we talk about something else?" Elias's voice was tinged with annoyance. "Living with her is killing me. She's disgusting? Bailey interjected, amusement lacing her tone. Something like that, Elias agreed with a heavy sigh. Look, I've told you I've had someone else for a while now. Someone much younger, way hotter than Genesis. The room spun as their words echoed in my head. Not only had they lied and manipulated me about the financial situation, but Elias was also unfaithful. The deception was comprehensive, extending beyond money to personal betrayal. Patience, Elias. Lincoln's voice cut through, firm despite the situation. Those damn receipts. His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. They were annoyed by the strings attached to the financial help. Reeling from the revelations, I stood frozen, a storm of emotions brewing inside. The people I had trusted most had used me, and the facade of their affection had shattered irreparably. The revelation that Elias and his parents had been plotting to remove the legal proofs of the loan, specifically the receipts my father insisted on, chilled me to the bone. Elias's next words, muttered with venomous intent, were even more alarming. "I can steal them," he snarled. "Sneak into her dad's house. Get rid of them. Problem solved." Despite the turmoil inside me, I knew I couldn't let on that I had overheard. Driven by a mixture of white-hot anger and a cold resolve, I decided to act. With a deep breath, I slammed the front door shut, the sound echoing through the house as a clear signal of my return. The living room door burst open, and Bailey's face appeared, painted with a feigned concern. "Oh, honey, you're back early. How did the funeral arrangements go?" Grief, both real and useful as a disguise for my inner storm, welled up in my eyes. "Going well," I choked out, my voice thick with genuine sorrow mixed with growing fury. Elias muttered something about coming over to help clear out my dad's house, while his parents shared a sly glance, a flicker of triumph in their eyes. Little did they know the game had indeed changed. The funeral for my dad was a blur of sorrow and superficial exchanges. Back at Bailey and Lincoln's house afterward, the facade of sympathy quickly fell away, replaced by a chilling indifference. It started with Elias. One moment, he was awkwardly by my side. The next, he was leaning in close, his voice low and harsh. "Get out," he spat. "Get out of this house, and don't come back." My heart pounded, but I met his gaze steadily. "What do you mean?" I managed to say. "Don't play dumb, Genesis. We're done. You've served your purpose," he sneered, revealing the depth of their deceit and his betrayal. "You and your fancy daddy with his deep pockets. We don't need you anymore. Besides, I have someone else now. Younger, hotter, everything you're not." His words were a visceral blow, but before I could respond, Bailey interjected, her tone dripping with venom. "Honestly, Genesis, we only tolerated you because we needed your money to fix this damn house. You were so desperate to play housewife that you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker." "And the house?" I asked, my voice tight, thinking of all I had done and sacrificed. "Our house, dear. You just happened to pay for it," Bailey laughed cruelly. "And speaking of paying," Elias sneered, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Consider these receipts a parting gift." With a smug look, he ripped them to shreds, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. But instead of crumbling under their cruelty, a calm washed over me. A slow smile spread across my face, contrasting starkly with their shocked expressions. "What's so funny?" Lincoln growled, his voice cracking. "Funny," I echoed, my voice laced with amusement and a dangerous edge. "You think those were the real receipts?" Their smugness flickered into doubt. Leaning in, I lowered my voice to a whisper, chilling in its clarity. "Those were just copies. The originals are safely tucked away with my lawyer." The color drained from Elias's face, Bailey's jaw dropped, and Lincoln looked as though he might faint. Finally, the tables had turned. "I want my money back," I stated firmly, ready to reclaim not just the funds but also my dignity and control over my life. My voice was firm and unwavering as I confronted them. "I want every penny of the $350,000 you swindled from me, and I want it by tomorrow, or I'll see you in court." Their pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. I was done giving them chances. Leaving them speechless and scrambling for a solution, I turned on my heel and exited the front door, which slammed shut with a satisfying bang. The next morning, I returned to the house I had once considered a home. Lincoln and his wife sat on the couch, their faces etched with practiced despair. Even Elias, the ultimate weasel, managed a hangdog expression. "Genesis," Lincoln started, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We've been talking," and I cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it, Lincoln. I know your game." Their feigned sadness faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Bailey dabbed at non-existent tears with a lace handkerchief. "Genesis, honey," she cried. "We were wrong. We truly are sorry. Can't we just forget all this and start over?" I scoffed. "Forget? Forget the way you called me disgusting? Forget the lies, the manipulation? And you, Elias." I turned to my ex-husband, my voice laced with ice. "Don't even think about pleading your case. A cheater is a cheater, and I have no interest in sharing my life with a lying scoundrel." Silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. Their carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by raw desperation. Then, an idea struck me, a solution that balanced justice with a touch of sweet satisfaction. "Look," I said, leaning forward, "you're broke. I have the money you stole. So here's the deal." Their eyes widened in a mixture of hope and suspicion. I outlined my plan, my voice firm and unwavering. "In exchange for the stolen money, you will sign over the ownership of the house to me." A tense silence followed, broken only by Lincoln's ragged breathing. Finally, with a defeated sigh, he nodded. "All right, Genesis, we agree." A triumphant smile spread across my face. Within the hour, my lawyer, a shark in a power suit, arrived. He drafted a watertight contract transferring the ownership of the house from Lincoln and Bailey to me. As they signed the final documents, their faces were a study of misery. The weight of their betrayal hung heavy in the air. I watched with satisfaction as they loaded their belongings into a beat-up pickup truck, their defeated figures shrinking into the distance. The house, once a symbol of their deceit, now stood before me as a symbol of my victory. A year had passed like a runaway train. The divorce was final, a clean break that left Elias with nothing but the clothes on his back, and good riddance. Justice, though slow, had arrived. News traveled fast in our small town, and gossip found its way to me courtesy of Margot and the girls during our usual Friday night wind-down. Elias's young and hot mistress was just a bored coworker looking for a harmless flirtation. When things got serious, she bolted faster than a scolded cat. As for his parents, they were now huddled in a dingy one-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the spacious house they'd tried to swindle from me. The initial sting of betrayal had dulled to a simmering ember, replaced by a fierce determination. My dad's unfinished business, his community garden project, became my focus. I poured my energy into nurturing his dream, turning grief and betrayal into a new beginning and a legacy of growth. Finding a new sense of purpose, I felt a deep connection to my father that seemed to bridge the gap his absence had created. One sunny afternoon, as I supervised a group of eager volunteers in the community garden, a familiar, grating voice reached my ears. It was Alice, the head of the Homeowners Association, who had always been overly critical of my dad's project. "Genesis," she drawled, her voice oozing condescension. "Such a noble cause you've taken up. But have you considered the unsightly aspects of a community garden?" I narrowed my eyes, my response firm and unwavering. "Unsightly? Alice? These are fresh vegetables, not a garbage dump. And unlike some, we're contributing to the community." Her facade of superiority quickly fell away, replaced by a visible flash of anger. But before she could snap back, a group of children burst into the scene. Their faces were alight with joy, and their arms were laden with freshly picked tomatoes. As Alice huffed and retreated in defeat, I took a moment to look around. The garden was alive with vibrant rows of vegetables, the joyful laughter of children, and the genuine camaraderie of the volunteers. My father would have been proud. A quiet smile played on my lips as I reflected on the journey. They had underestimated me and tried to break my spirit, but in their attempts, they had only become a minor detail in my larger story of resilience and growth. The garden wasn't just a tribute to my father, it was a testament to enduring, flourishing against the odds, and the power of community. My name is Elena, and 3 years ago, I tied the knot with Logan, believing we shared the same vision for our future. We settled into a luxurious apartment at the pinnacle of a towering skyscraper in the bustling city center. The view was mesmerizing, and I cherished the moments spent by the expansive windows each evening, watching the sunset drape the cityscape in golden hues. I held a prominent position as the finance department head at a media production company. My career was rapidly ascending, demanding my commitment to ensure a prosperous future for us both. However, my unwavering focus on work began to strain our home life. "Elena, you're hardly ever home," Logan lamented one night as I entered our home close to 10 p.m. "What's the use of this stunning apartment if you can't enjoy it?" Exhausted, I placed my briefcase down. "Logan, we've gone over this before. My career is crucial. Not just for me, but for us. It's what supports this lifestyle." Before he could mention his mother's opinions, I swiftly interjected, "I'm not interested in conforming to the role your mother envisions for me." Logan's expression grew somber. "Maybe you should care, she's family," I retorted firmly, "and so am I. You knew my priorities when we married. Career first, then family." That night, as I lay awake, I sensed the growing rift between us, exacerbated by his mother's influence. Yet, I was resolved to persevere. I had come too far to back down now. The next day, my boss, Mr. Arthur, beckoned me into his office with promising news. "Elena, we're merging with a major company from another city, and I want you to lead the new department." My heart leaped at the opportunity. "That's wonderful, Mr. Arthur. I appreciate your confidence in me." He cautioned, "This role will be demanding. Can you commit fully?" Without hesitation, I assured him, "Absolutely, sir. I'm ready for this challenge." Eager to share the good news with Logan, I stopped by our favorite restaurant for a celebratory dinner. I set the table meticulously with our finest china, lit candles, and awaited his arrival. However, his mood was visibly sour. "What's all this?" he queried, scanning the setup with suspicion. My excitement spilled over as I exclaimed, "I'm up for a major promotion. This could mean a new house, global travel, endless possibilities." He cut me off, his tone icy. "And more hours at work? When will us become a priority?" "I am prioritizing us," I insisted. "This is for our future." He scoffed. "What future? You're never here. This apartment is always a mess. I'm fed up with takeout." Without another word, Logan retreated to his office and slammed the door. I sat alone, the meal before me cooling off, the apartment's opulence overshadowed by the chaos. 3 weeks after hiring a housekeeper, I noticed a remarkable transformation. Our home was immaculate. This small adjustment seemed a trivial sacrifice for the sake of my career advancement and, hopefully, a step towards mending our strained relationship. We had started to enjoy the benefits of having a housekeeper, with delicious dinners ready each evening, but this change didn't seem to soften Logan's growing discontent. "Found a way to replace yourself at home, too?" he quipped bitterly as we sat for dinner one night. I kept my voice light, hoping to ease the tension. I thought it would help us both, keeping the apartment tidy and ensuring we have nice meals to come home to. "But that's not the problem, is it, Elena?" Logan interrupted, his voice raised as he slammed his fork down. "What's next?" "Finding someone to replace you in other parts of our life." His words felt like a physical blow. "That's uncalled for," I replied quietly, shocked by his harshness. "Uncalled for? Let's talk about what's uncalled for." Logan stood, his chair scraping back violently. "It's uncalled for to always come back to an empty house. It's uncalled for to have a wife more committed to her job than her family." He left the room abruptly, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heavy heart. In the following weeks, our home was filled with cold silences and sharp exchanges, making every interaction a minefield. My focus on my work, driven by the ambition for promotion, meant I was barely aware of the deepening rift between us. Deciding to break the cycle, I seized a rare day off as an opportunity for reconciliation. I sent Logan a message, filled with hope, planning a romantic dinner tonight, complete with your favorite dessert. He read it but didn't respond. I interpreted his silence as consent and went ahead with the preparations. I decorated the dining table with candles, selected fine wine, dressed in my best outfit, and waited eagerly for him. My anticipation turned to dismay when Logan walked in, not alone, but with his mother, Addison, in tow. "Oh, Elena, what a surprise," Addison cooed, her tone dripping with feigned sweetness. "Were you expecting company?" I forced a smile. I wanted to surprise Logan with a nice dinner. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "Well, I hope there's enough for 3, Addison said, making herself comfortable at the table set for 2. Logan avoided my gaze, taking a seat silently. I suppressed my frustration and fetched an extra place setting, my plans for a romantic evening dashed. Addison dominated the dinner conversation, throwing in subtle digs. "You know, my friend Sarah just became a grandmother. It's such a blessing to have little ones around," she remarked, eyeing me pointedly. I took a deep gulp of wine, replying curtly, "That sounds wonderful." She continued, "Naturally, you need to be around to raise them. A woman's primary role is towards her family, after all." I tightened my grip on my fork, my temper flaring. "Actually, Addison, a woman's role is whatever she chooses it to be." Her eyes narrowed. "Really? And what about your roles as a wife and potential mother to my grandchildren?" Standing abruptly, my chair screeching back, I reached my breaking point. "I think it's time for you to leave, Addison." "Elena," Logan started, attempting to intervene. But I was resolute. "No, Logan, I can't do this anymore. This is my home." Addison rose to her full height, indignation coloring her features. "Well, I never." "Logan, are you going to allow her to speak to me this way?" After they departed, I poured myself another glass of wine and collapsed onto the couch, the evening's dreams dissolving around me. In my elegant dress, amid the dwindling candlelight and untouched food, I pondered a distressing thought. Was this the start of our unraveling? The following morning brought an empty house. A note on the kitchen counter revealed that Logan had gone to stay with his mother to clear his head. My hands trembled as I crumpled the note, tossing it away, a whirlwind of anger and sorrow swirling within me. Days turned into weeks with Logan away, and upon his return, the distance between us had only grown. We navigated around each other like 4 strangers, exchanging minimal words. I reassured myself that we just needed time to adjust, but deep down, unease gnawed at me. Then, one evening after a grueling day of meetings, I returned home to a startling scene. A floral, cloying scent wafted through the air as I opened the door, and there, in our living room, was Addison, in a bathrobe and slippers, looking unsettlingly at ease. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my eyes darting between Addison and Logan, who sat on the couch with a look of discomfort. Addison's smile was tight, unconvincing. "Oh, Elena, how nice it is that you joined us. We were just discussing dinner plans." "Dinner plans?" My voice climbed in pitch. "And why are you dressed like you live here?" Logan inhaled deeply, his next words hitting me like a ton of bricks. "Mom's going to be staying with us for a while. I'm tired of being alone all the time, and since you're hardly ever here," I was speechless. "You invited your mother to live with us without discussing it with me? If you were ever home, maybe we could have talked about it," Logan retorted sharply. I turned to Addison, who wore a smug look as she observed our confrontation. "This is my home. You can't just move in here." Addison's expression hardened. "Your home? This is my son's home too, and if he wants me here, then here I'll stay." "Get out," I said, my voice low and menacing. Logan stepped in front of me. "If you don't like it, Elena, you can leave." I was aghast. "Excuse me?" This is my apartment. I bought it before we were even married. Now it's our apartment, Logan declared. And I'm telling you, if you can't accept my mother being here, then you can get out. Stunned into silence, I stared at the man before me. This was not the Logan I married. He was a stranger echoing his mother's sentiments. Addison advanced towards me with a threatening look. You heard him, dear. If you don't like the new arrangement, there's the door. I instinctively stepped back, my hand reaching for my phone. If you touch me, I'm calling the police. Addison's face shifted to shock. Then she theatrically clutched her chest, sinking back onto the couch as tears streamed down her face. Oh, how you've hardened her heart. That awful job. To think she'd threaten her own family. Logan rushed to comfort his mother, casting me a venomous glance. Without another word, I turned and walked to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. The next morning, as I lay awake, my phone rang. It was Mr. Arthur, my boss. I need you on a plane today, he said briskly. The merger is at a critical point. The call came early at 7 a.m. from Mr. Arthur informing me that my presence was crucial to oversee the financial aspects of our merger. Of course, Mr. Arthur, I'll be there, I assured him as I glanced around the still silent house, assuming Logan and Addison were asleep. I quickly packed a suitcase, and just as I finished, Logan appeared in the doorway. His expression was icy. Going somewhere, he asked. I stood up straight, meeting his cold gaze. Yes, I have to go on a business trip for the merger. I'll be back soon, and we can talk then, okay? As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, Addison's eyes followed me from the living room, her smile smug. I paused at the door, turning back to Logan. I'm leaving now. I'll text you when I land. His response was curt and chilling. Don't bother coming back. His words felt like a blow, but I managed to hide my pain. Silently, I walked out, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing like a somber gong. The business trip was intense, a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and late nights spent poring over financial documents. It was a welcome distraction from the turmoil at home. Each night, I sent Logan a text to let him know I was okay, but each went unanswered. After 9 days, I returned, my heart pounding as the taxi pulled up to my building. Approaching my apartment, something was off. My key didn't fit in the lock. Confused, I knocked. The door swung open, revealing Logan and Addison casually dressed as if nothing was amiss. Logan, I said, my voice laced with confusion. Why doesn't my key work? Logan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Because I changed the locks. I felt as if I'd stepped into a nightmare. This is insane, Logan. You can't do this. This is my home. His expression was stone cold. Not anymore. You have a choice to make, Elena. Right here, right now. Your career or your home and marriage. I couldn't believe the transformation in him. This was not the Logan I married, but a stranger, twisted by his mother's toxic influence. You can't be serious, I whispered, barely able to accept the reality before me. Logan pulled out a stack of papers, divorce papers. Dead serious. Sign these, and you can go back to your job. Tear them up, and you can come back inside, as a proper wife should. I looked from the papers to Logan, then to Addison. At that moment, the clarity of my future crystallized, a life of resentment, of being controlled, of sacrificing everything I'd worked for. Without a word, I took the papers and signed my name on every dotted line. There, I said, handing them back to him. I chose my career because clearly I don't have a husband or a family anymore. Their faces registered shock, almost comical in their disbelief. Before they could respond, I turned on my heel and walked away, my suitcase trailing behind me. As I stood in the elevator, watching the numbers descend, a laugh bubbled up from deep within me. I had been ousted from my own home, and in doing so, I had divorced a man who no longer recognized me as his equal. Within just 10 minutes, I found myself without a home. That evening, as I sat alone in a hotel room, my thoughts were in turmoil, reflecting on the tumultuous events of the day. The following morning, I rose early and made a call to my friend Lena, a lawyer I had known since our college days. Elena, what's wrong? You never call this early. Lena's voice rang with concern over the phone. I spent the next hour detailing the entire ordeal to her. After I finished, there was a brief silence from her end before she finally spoke, her tone steady and reassuring. Elena, the apartment you bought, was it before your marriage? She inquired. Yes, I replied. In that case, it's usually regarded as separate property, not marital property. It shouldn't be divided in the divorce. Relief swept through me. Newly energized, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor, focusing on a major merger at my job. Despite the long hours, which often saw me sleeping on my office couch instead of returning to the hotel, I pressed on. A few days later, Maria, a realtor and another longtime friend, called me. Her voice was laden with worry. Elena, honey, are you alright? I just saw Logan's posts online. He's saying quite unpleasant things about you. What kind of things? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Maria hesitated, then said, he's labeling you a heartless career woman and is talking about suing for alimony and trying to claim the apartment in the divorce. I laughed bitterly. Let him try. The apartment is mine, and he knows it. After ending the call with Maria, I sat at my desk, my thoughts racing. Logan was attempting to tarnish my reputation, portraying me as the villain in our saga. I couldn't let him succeed. Picking up the phone, I dialed Mr. Arthur's number. After I outlined the situation to him, he responded with a supportive tone. Elena, he said, your personal life won't impact your job here. You're a valued employee. Don't let this situation affect your performance. I thanked him, grateful for his support. Mr. Arthur suggested taking some time off to handle my personal issues, especially since the merger was nearing completion. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, I replied. That evening, as I was about to leave the office, I noticed a notification on my phone. Logan had started a live broadcast from what used to be our shared apartment, now clearly mine. Against my better judgment, I watched as he and a film crew discussed extensive renovations. An idea suddenly sparked in my mind, and I called Maria with a mischievous plan. Maria, it's Elena. How quickly can you sell an apartment? I asked. Her laughter filled the phone. For you, Elena, I can work wonders. What's the plan? As I outlined my thoughts, Maria responded with excited gasps and chuckles. Oh, this is going to be brilliant, she exclaimed. I already know a couple who's been searching for just this kind of place. They're very discreet. They assured me the deal could be closed in just 3 weeks, maybe even less. After the call, I reclined in my chair, a playful smile forming as I thought about Logan's misguided confidence. He thought he was in control, but he was about to be surprised. The next 3 weeks flew by in a blur of tireless work. By day, I wrapped up the merger, and by night, I handled the paperwork, coordinated with Maria, and watched Logan's boastful social media updates about his renovation plans. When the pivotal day finally arrived, I donned my best suit and took a moment over my morning coffee, preparing for the events that would unfold. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria popped up. It's done. Paperwork signed. Money transferred. New owners en route. Good luck. A wave of satisfaction swept over me. It was time. I tried to focus on work at the office, but my thoughts kept wandering to the imminent drama. Around midday, Lena texted me. The TV crew and Logan's mom are here. He's looking very pleased with himself. The show's starting. For the next hour, I struggled to concentrate, my eyes constantly flicking to my phone. Finally, Lena's text came through rapidly. You won't believe this. New owners just arrived. Logan's stunned. The crew is freaking out. This is epic. I couldn't contain my laughter, earning puzzled looks from my colleagues. I excused myself and retreated to the bathroom, allowing myself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Returning to my desk, I found an email from Lena containing a video link. With trembling hands, I clicked it. The video opened with Logan in the center of what used to be our apartment, now just mine, grandly discussing his plans while his mother hovered smugly in the background. Suddenly, a commotion off-camera drew everyone's attention. The camera swung to capture a well-dressed couple entering, followed by Maria holding documents. Excuse me, the man said politely yet assertively. but I believe you're in our apartment." Logan's face morphed from confusion to annoyance. "Your apartment? This is my home," he blustered. Maria stepped forward, her professional demeanor intact. "Actually, Mr. Anderson, this apartment now legally belongs to my clients. The sale was finalized this morning." The camera captured Logan's shock as he processed the reality, from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. "Sale? What sale? Elena couldn't have sold this apartment without my permission." "Actually," Maria replied, her smile unwavering, "she could, and she did. The apartment was in her name, purchased before your marriage. She had every right to sell it." The scene dissolved into chaos. Logan yelling, his mother dramatically wailing, and the TV crew debating the use of the footage. The video ended with Logan and his mother being escorted out by security, the TV crew eagerly following, sensing they had stumbled upon a spectacular show. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with another message, "My office now," from Mr. Arthur. As I entered his office, bracing for the worst, I was surprised to find him smiling. "Elena, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I've seen the video. It's all over social media." My face flushed with embarrassment, unsure of what was to come. "Sir, I apologize for the unintended publicity this situation has caused," I said, feeling mortified that my personal life had spilled over into public view. To my surprise, Mr. Arthur chuckled in response. "Elena, you've just demonstrated exactly why you're the ideal candidate to lead our new department. You're clever and resourceful, and you've shown you can turn a difficult situation to your advantage, precisely what we need for this merger." His words brought a smile to my face. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your support. Now," he continued, his voice taking on a more serious note, "I think it's time you took that week off we discussed. Settle your matters, find yourself a new place, and when you return, we'll finalize your promotion and start you in your new role." During the following week, I dedicated myself to finding a new home, eager for a fresh beginning somewhere that held no memories of Logan or our dissolved marriage. With the proceeds from the sale of the old apartment, I had a broad array of options. In my search, I discovered an ideal little house on the city's outskirts, near our newly merged company's headquarters. It was charming, with a beautiful garden and a picturesque mountain view, a serene escape from past turmoil. I made an offer immediately, and it was quickly accepted. The day I moved in, Lena and Maria came over to help. We unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, filling the house with laughter and light-hearted chatter, letting the stress of recent weeks dissolve as evening fell. Standing in the garden with a glass of wine, I felt a profound peace wash over me as I gazed at the mountains. It was a relief to feel grounded again. When I returned to work the next week, ready to embrace my new responsibilities, I sensed the curious gazes and heard the whispers as I walked through the office. I kept my head high, determined not to be shaken. Mr. Arthur welcomed me at my new office, a prime corner spot with a splendid city view. "Ready to get started?" he asked, smiling. "More than ready, sir," I responded, feeling a surge of excitement. Settling into my new role, I immersed myself in the complexities of the merger, reveling in the challenges that required long hours and deep concentration. I loved every moment, realizing this was what I had worked and sacrificed so much for. One evening, while working late, my phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Logan, pleading for a reconciliation. I paused, considering the message, then deleted it without a reply. That chapter of my life was definitively closed. Now I was writing a new story, one where I held the pen. My name is Ariana. I've been married to Hudson for over 17 years, and we've shared a cozy apartment courtesy of the real estate firm where I work as an appraiser. Our son, Waylon, has already graduated from college and moved out, which made Hudson and I empty nesters. Hudson maintained a regular office job, and for many years, our relationship had been quite stable. However, recently, Hudson's constant critiques of my actions became more frequent and harder to endure. Nonetheless, I remained hopeful that this was a temporary phase. As my 52nd birthday neared, we planned a celebration with our friends and family, hoping it might rekindle our connection. We reserved a lovely restaurant and sent out invitations, setting the stage for a perfect evening. On the event day, our guests began to arrive, and I greeted them cheerfully. However, I felt a nagging sense that something was amiss, especially since my parents were uncharacteristically late. Amidst the festivities, I stepped away to call my mother. "Where are you guys?" The party started. I tried to sound calm, but concern tinged my voice. After a pause, my mother chilled me. "Ariana, darling, I'm so sorry. Your father passed away this morning." I was struck dumb with shock and disbelief. "No, that can't be true," I managed, but my mother's sorrow confirmed the grim reality. She had intended to tell me the next day, to not ruin my celebration. Returning to the party in a daze, Hudson noticed my distress and immediately asked what was wrong. I told him through tears about my father. His response was startling. "That's terrible, Ariana, but we can't cancel the party now. Everything's been paid for, and it wouldn't be fair to our guests." I was stunned by his insensitivity. Unable to comprehend his lack of empathy, I announced to everyone that I had to leave to be with my mother and encouraged them to stay and enjoy the celebration. As I headed for the door, Hudson called after me, suggesting I was being dramatic and could visit my mother the next day. Angered and heartbroken by his reaction, I left him there, speechless, as I rushed out into the cool night air. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found my mother in the dark, clutching one of my father's sweaters. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, met mine. As we embraced, the grief we shared was palpable. Sitting with her in the silent, dimly lit room, I realized my life had irrevocably changed, not just because of my father's death, but because I had seen the true nature of my husband on a day that should have brought us closer. On the day of the funeral, I stood beside my mother, accepting condolences with Waylon by my side, offering his quiet strength. As we faced this profound loss together, I understood the depth of the bonds that truly mattered. As I looked around at the gathering after the funeral service, I noticed the glaring absence of Hudson and his family. Their absence felt like a stark betrayal. Later, as we regrouped at my mother's home, Waylon confronted me, puzzled and upset. "Mom, where's Dad and Grandma and Grandpa?" I could only shake my head, a mix of anger and disappointment bubbling up as I replied, "I don't know. Honey, they didn't come." Waylon was visibly frustrated, and I could hardly blame him. That evening, after the guests had left and my mother drifted into a weary sleep, I called Hudson, unable to mask my frustration. "Where were you today?" I demanded. His excuse was that he and his parents had gotten sick, supposedly from something they ate at the birthday dinner. The timing was too convenient, and I couldn't hide my skepticism. "All three of you? You couldn't make it to my father's funeral? Do you realize how that looks, how that feels?" His apology felt hollow, and I hung up, too angry to continue the conversation. In the weeks that followed, my mother's health deteriorated, and she sank into a deep depression. I juggled work and her care, while Hudson grew increasingly distant and irritable about the situation. One evening, he suggested, rather coldly, that we consider placing her in a nursing home. I was appalled. "No, she doesn't have much time left, and I want to be with her," I insisted. We debated heatedly until I proposed a solution that would alter our lives, moving into her larger, more accommodating house to care for her. Hudson, disgusted, balked at the idea. "I'm not obligated to take care of a sick stranger," he said, refusing to see her as anything but an inconvenience. The argument stretched over days, with Hudson unmoved by my pleas. It wasn't until I pointed out the financial benefits of moving, no housing or grocery expenses, that he reluctantly agreed. Moving day was a mix of emotions. My mother's house was spacious and beautifully renovated, a sharp contrast to our previous apartment. Hudson seemed impressed by the property, commenting on its beauty and the hard work my father had put into it, though I held back my sharper thoughts. Initially, Hudson boasted about our new living arrangement to his colleagues, omitting the real reason for our move. However, as time passed, his dissatisfaction became evident. One evening, as I was cooking, he burst into the kitchen, complaining about the pervasive smell of illness. His harsh words were the last straw for me. I slammed down the knife I was holding, my patience finally worn thin. As I was preparing dinner and chopping vegetables, the smell of illness filled the room, a constant reminder of my mother's condition. Hudson's indifference grew each day. He avoided her room and complained whenever he passed her door. It was heartbreaking to watch my mother suffer not just from her illness, but also from Hudson's blatant contempt. One quiet evening, as Hudson and I sat in a strained silence at the dinner table, my mother gathered her strength to speak. "Ariana, Hudson," she began, her voice frail yet firm, "I want to thank you both for taking care of me. I know it hasn't been easy." Hudson barely acknowledged her, his eyes fixed on his plate. "I want to show my appreciation," Mom continued, causing Hudson to finally look up with a hint of interest. "Hudson, I'd like to give you the land this house is built on, and Ariana, the house itself will be yours." I was stunned. "Mom, no, you don't have to do this," I protested, but Hudson's interest was visibly piqued. My mother insisted on proceeding with her plans, adding that any remaining money would go to Waylon. Hudson, unable to hide his excitement, leaped up and fetched a bottle of wine. "Let's celebrate," he exclaimed, pouring himself a glass. Under his breath, he muttered, "Maybe the old gal will kick it sooner rather than later." I was horrified by his cruel words. "How dare you?" I hissed, rising so quickly that my chair crashed behind me. "You heartless monsters." Hudson scoffed and retorted dismissively, implying that my mother was already as good as gone, and that at least we would benefit from it. The ensuing argument was ferocious. Hudson insulted me ruthlessly, and I responded with equal fervor, releasing years of repressed frustration and disappointment. He stormed out, declaring he would stay with his parents. As days turned into weeks, Hudson stayed away, and an urgent work trip came up, a trip I couldn't refuse as it was crucial for my job, now more than ever since I was the sole caregiver for my mother. The idea of leaving her alone was daunting. I discussed my dilemma with her, and with typical selflessness, she suggested a temporary stay in hospice care. "It's just while you're away," she reassured me. "Those places are comfortable, and I'll be well taken care of." Tears filled my eyes as I agreed, heartbroken yet knowing it was the best option. We arranged her hospice care, and I prepared for my trip, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. I didn't inform Hudson about the hospice or my travel plans. He was still with his parents, purportedly to teach me a lesson. The irony of his absence during this time of genuine need was not lost on me. The night before I left, I sent Hudson a terse text, "Going on a business trip. Please look after the house." I hoped he might reflect on his actions, but more than anything, I needed him to at least maintain the practical aspects of our shared life in my absence. I didn't expect a response from Hudson, and none came. 5 days into my business trip, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Hudson. His tone dripped with a twisted delight as he greeted me. "Hello, Ariana. Guess what I've done? I've demolished your precious house." Watching the walls fall and the roof collapse was spectacular. I felt a chill run through me. "You did what? Why would you do something like that?" I managed to say. He replied with disturbing glee, "Because now you'll have to rely on me to build a new one on my land." "That's right, my land. Your mother gave it to me, remember? You'll be dependent on me, Ariana. Just like a good wife should be." As the gravity of his actions sank in, a hysterical laugh burst from me, echoing through the empty hotel room. Hudson seemed unsettled by my reaction. "Why are you laughing? This isn't funny, Ariana." Once I regained my composure, my voice was calm but icy. "Oh, Hudson, you fool. Mom changed her mind at the last minute. She didn't trust you, especially after seeing how you treated her. So she switched it. The house is yours, or rather was yours. But the land? That's mine." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before Hudson's small, disbelieving voice came through. "You're lying." I'm not, I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. And Hudson, I want a divorce. I hung up, my hands trembling as the reality of his betrayal and the need for a divorce settled in. It struck me then with horrifying clarity. Hudson didn't know about Mom's move to hospice. He had been willing to demolish the house with her potentially inside. Upon returning, I immediately filed for divorce. Hudson fought bitterly, claiming the land based on my mother's initial verbal agreement, but I was prepared. I had the updated paperwork showing the last-minute changes she made. The legal battle was fierce, but justice prevailed, and I retained the land, leaving Hudson with nothing but the remains of his destructiveness. Throughout this ordeal, Waylon was my steadfast supporter. When he learned of his father's actions, his reaction was one of shock and revulsion. He did what? I can't believe it. I'm done with him, Waylon declared, severing ties with his father. After finalizing the divorce and gaining full ownership of the land, I chose to sell it. The proceeds allowed me to purchase a modest apartment. Meanwhile, my mother's health continued to decline. I visited her daily at the hospice, savoring every moment. She passed away peacefully, with me by her side, a few months later. Her funeral was small and private, and again Hudson and his family were absent, which this time felt like a relief. In the weeks following her passing, as I sorted through her belongings, I sensed something amiss. It wasn't until one evening, while browsing eBay, that I discovered listings for familiar items: Mom's antique vase, her cherished armchair, even the pearls Dad had given her on their 27th anniversary. Anger coursed through me as I realized Hudson was behind this. The next morning, fueled by a mix of fury and resolve, I drove to Hudson's parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, ready to confront him and reclaim what was rightfully part of my heritage. When I arrived at Hudson's parents' house and knocked, it was my former father-in-law who answered the door. He appeared surprisingly frail and pale, which caught me off guard. "Are you okay?" I asked impulsively, concerned by his gaunt appearance. He twisted his face in anger and snapped back, "I'm perfectly healthy, unlike your parents." His harsh words stung, and I responded more out of reflex than a genuine apology. "I'm sorry." My real purpose came forth as I continued. "I've seen my mother's items for sale online. I want them back." Hudson's mother joined us at the door, her expression one of feigned concern. "Oh, Ariana dear, those things belong to us now. After all, the house was Hudson's when your mother passed." My frustration mounted. "That's not how it works, and you know it. Those are my family's heirlooms, and I want them back now." They refused, and the ensuing argument turned bitter and loud. Eventually, they shut the door in my face, but I was far from defeated. Determined, I headed straight to the police station and filed a report. Faced with potential legal action, Hudson's parents reluctantly returned my mother's belongings: the jewelry, the furniture, everything. 7 months had passed since the dust settled on my divorce and the ordeal with Hudson's family. Life had slowly started to find a new rhythm, and I was beginning to heal from the wounds of betrayal. Then, unexpectedly, I received news that shattered our fragile peace. My former father-in-law had passed away from cancer, which had been in its advanced, untreatable stages by the time it was diagnosed. Despite our strained relations, I felt a pang of sympathy. No one deserved to suffer that way. My empathy, however, was soon tested when I received a summons to the notary's office for the reading of his will. Hudson, his mother, Waylon, and I were all called to attend. The atmosphere was tense. Hudson avoided looking at me, treating me as if I were a stranger, while his mother couldn't hide her disdain. "How dare you show your face here, you ungrateful gold digger," she hissed as I took my seat. I kept my composure, and Waylon offered his hand in silent support. The notary began to read the will, and the contents took everyone by surprise. My former father-in-law had left his house to Waylon, while the land and money were bequeathed to Hudson and his mother. Hudson and his mother erupted in anger. "This is outrageous," Hudson yelled. "Everything should have come to us. We're his real family." The notary adjusted his glasses and calmly stated, "The will is legally binding." Mr. Matthew was of sound mind when he made these decisions. You won't be able to contest this in court. As we left the office, I noticed Waylon was deep in thought and unusually quiet. I gave him space, knowing he would talk when he was ready. 3 weeks later, I was enjoying a moment of peace in my apartment when my phone rang. It was my former mother-in-law. Her voice panicked. Ariana, you have to come quickly. Your son, he's gone mad. He's hired construction equipment to tear down the house. Rushing to the scene, I found chaos. Heavy machinery loomed over the house, and Waylon stood resolute. Hudson and his mother were frantic, pleading with the construction workers to stop. Waylon approached me, his expression determined yet calm. Mom, I know this might seem extreme, he began, preparing to explain his drastic decision. Waylon looked at me with a resolve that was hard and sharp. It's retribution for what they did. To Grandma's house. To you. To us, he explained. I nodded, understanding the swirl of pain and anger that fueled his decision. I know, sweetie. I'm not here to stop you. He gave a nod to the foreman, and the noise of the destruction filled the air. Hudson and his mother's cries were lost amidst the sounds of crashing walls and breaking glass. As the house fell, my emotions were a storm. Part of me mourned the loss of what once was, memories of laughter and love that the house once held. But another part of me felt a cathartic release, a sense of justice being served. Weeks later, as I was settling into a peaceful evening, a knock interrupted my solitude. Opening the door, I found Hudson and his mother, their appearance ragged and worn. Ariana, Hudson began, his voice a blend of desperation and veiled bitterness. We need to talk. We have nowhere to go. We were hoping we could stay with you for a while. I was speechless. Stay with me? After everything? You've always been so kind and responsible, his mother chimed in, her eyes pleading. The audacity of their request left me reeling. These were the people who had inflicted so much pain, who had disrespected my mother in her final days, now seeking my charity. No, I replied with finality, absolutely not. Their faces fell, but I continued, my voice firm as years of suppressed frustration and hurt surged. Have you forgotten how you treated my mother? How you labeled her a burden? How you were ready to destroy her house while she might have been inside, just to spite me? They seemed ashamed, but beneath that, I sensed their simmering anger. We've made mistakes, Hudson admitted reluctantly. Where are we supposed to go? He added. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences. Just like I had to, they left, muttering under their breath. After they were gone, I immediately blocked their numbers. I wanted no further disturbances from them. Through mutual friends, I later learned that Hudson had sold the land where the demolished house once stood. With the money, he purchased a small apartment in a rundown part of the city. Mentioning this to Waylon during one of our dinners, he snorted, "That's where they belong," his tone bitter. In a crumbling apartment, surrounded by decay. It's fitting, isn't it? I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was a twinge of pity for Hudson and his mother, now reduced to such a state. But the larger part of me remembered all the harm they had caused, the harsh words and cruel actions. The past months have been transformative for me. My career at the real estate company was thriving, and I had recently received a generous quarterly bonus. Being recognized for my hard work was gratifying, especially after such a tumultuous period. Running my hand over the smooth surface of my mother's restored old writing desk, I felt a connection to her. The familiar grain of the wood evoked memories of her sitting there, writing letters and managing her finances. It felt as if a part of her was still with me, guiding me as I rebuilt my life. The ringing of my phone interrupted my reflections. It was Waylon, his voice buzzing with excitement. As I answered the phone, Waylon's voice brimmed with excitement. "Mom, I've got news," he announced eagerly. "What is it, honey?" I asked, though I had a hunch about what he might say. I proposed to Melody, and she said yes. My heart overflowed with joy. Melody was a wonderful young woman, kind and intelligent, and she truly brought out the best in Waylon. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news." I'm so happy for you both. We talked for a while about their plans for the future, and then Waylon's tone shifted to something more serious. Mom, there's something else I want to talk to you about, the wedding. I've decided I don't want to invite Dad or Grandma. After everything they've done, I don't want them there on the happiest day of my life. I took a deep breath, understanding his decision. Waylon, it's entirely your decision. Your wedding day should be a celebration of love and joy, surrounded by people who truly care about you and Melody. If that's what feels right for you, then I support you completely. After we hung up, my mind lingered on Hudson and his mother. I didn't actively seek information about them, but snippets of their lives reached me occasionally. The last update was that Hudson was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, still living in that rundown apartment with his mother. They had tried to control and break me, but instead, they found themselves struggling in the mess they'd made, while I had emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient. I picked up a framed photo of my parents from the newly restored side table. Gazing at it, I whispered, "I wish you could see this, Mom and Dad. I think you'd be proud." Their memories and the values they instilled in me continued to guide me, reinforcing my resolve to live a life filled with integrity and love, a stark contrast to the bitterness and regret that seemed to fill Hudson and his mother's days. My parents' legacy was a beacon in my journey, and I felt their quiet approval in my heart as I navigated this new chapter of my life. Last week, I celebrated my 35th birthday, but birthdays lost their charm a while ago. It's not just the age, it's also the chronic illness that emerges at the most inconvenient moments. This year followed the same script. The day after my muted celebration, consisting solely of takeout pizza and solitude, I found myself heading to the clinic for a checkup and some pain management therapy. The clinic had become a familiar place, offering both solace and a somber reminder of reality. Its white walls, the pervasive scent of disinfectant, and the overly hopeful expressions worn by faces I'd come to recognize marked it as a place of routine visits. Waiting for my appointment, I spotted Brian, the exceptionally charming nurse who'd intermittently been part of my treatment team over the past year. With his dark hair, warm smile, and empathetic eyes, Brian had a way of making you feel genuinely cared for. "Deborah, I didn't expect you here so soon. Everything okay?" he asked, approaching me with a concern that resonated in his voice. "Just the usual tune-up," I responded, trying to mask the nervous excitement his presence induced. Brian's laugh lightened the mood. "Well, let's get you checked in. I'll be taking care of you today." His phrasing lingered in the air, hinting at meanings my heart fluttered to consider. As we moved toward the examination room, I noticed other patients glancing at him, clearly drawn by his allure. Brian took my vitals with professionalism and gentleness. "Blood pressure's a bit high. Stressed about something?" he queried. "You could say that," I replied, my gaze drifting off as I pondered the complexities of life. "Tell me about it," Brian responded, jotting down notes before continuing. "You need to relax more, Deborah. You push yourself too hard." "That's easy for you to say," I snapped back, more sharply than intended. Brian paused, his steady gaze meeting mine. "I know it's tough. You're always here, always battling. When do you get time for yourself? For something more, for someone's?" His directness caught me off guard. "What are you suggesting, Brian?" I asked, the intensity of the moment palpable. He took a moment before replying, "I see you, Deborah. Not just as the patient, or the woman always fighting a battle. I see you, and I like what I see." The closeness suddenly felt overwhelming. Despite my reservations about my condition, Brian's words broke through my defenses. "Brian, I'm not sure I can. I don't care about the condition," he interrupted, his voice firm yet caring. "I care about you, the real you beyond the medical charts and doctor visits." It was a lot to process at once. A part of me wanted to flee, but another, long-silenced part, wondered about the possibility of letting someone into my guarded world. Since that conversation, Brian and I gradually began to spend more time together outside the clinical environment. It wasn't just about medical appointments anymore. It was about dinners, movies, and long drives, activities I hadn't allowed myself to enjoy for a long time. Brian made them simple, enjoyable, and exciting. He brought a new perspective to even the simplest things like a walk in the park. About 7 months later, after that pivotal talk in the clinic, our relationship had blossomed into something beautiful and supportive, showing me how to embrace life's moments despite the challenges. We were lounging on my couch, savoring some budget-friendly takeout after a hectic week. I was still chuckling from a joke he'd made, my laughter echoing around the room when his demeanor shifted dramatically. The laughter still lingering in the air, I noticed his expression turn serious. "Deborah, there's something I need to ask you," Brian said, his tone shifting from jovial to intense, causing my laughter to catch in my throat. He paused, taking a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and produced a small box. My heart raced at the sight. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I know this seems quick and maybe a bit crazy, but I don't want to wait any longer. Deborah, will you marry me?" His voice held a mix of determination and a hint of nerves. I was speechless for a moment, my eyes flicking from the ring to his earnest face. "Brian, I don't know what to say." "Yes," I finally managed, my voice a whisper. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding, his famous lopsided grin breaking across his face. I took the box from him, the ring simple yet stunning. Understated but perfect for us. "Brian, I do love you. I really do. But if we're doing this, it's going to be on my terms," I declared. "Anything," he responded immediately, his face open and expectant. "I want a prenup," I stated bluntly. His expression remained unchanged. No surprise, no disappointment. Just readiness. "If something happens to me, everything goes to you. But if we split, I don't want there to be any issues." "Sure," Brian interrupted. "I don't care about that. I don't want your stuff, Deborah. I just want you." That was when I knew my answer for certain. "All right then, yes. I'll marry you." The joy that illuminated his face was like dawn breaking after a long, dark night. He slid the ring onto my finger, and our kiss sealed our whirlwind but utterly heartfelt engagement. We didn't hesitate long. The wedding was set for just a few weeks later, an intimate ceremony at the city hall with just him, me, his sister, and her husband. It was an unconventional wedding. No lavish gown, no throngs of guests, just the essentials. Yet it felt perfectly right with Brian. We exchanged rings, signed the papers, and it was official. We were married. As we stepped out of the city hall, his sister tossed confetti into the air, her laughter mingling with shouts of congratulations. Life with Brian initially felt like a fairy tale, or my version of one at least. He left his nursing job, tired of the emotional drain of caring for others day in and day out. With the restaurant doing well, it was nice having him around more. For the first few months, Brian was the ideal husband out of a classic romance novel. He cooked meals that would make any chef envious and kept our home immaculate. Dinners were extravagant affairs with candles and background music that made me feel like royalty. But slowly, things began to change. It started almost imperceptibly. I'd come home to find him secluded in his office, the space he claimed for himself right after our wedding, supposedly to manage household tasks like bills. "Dinner in 22?" he'd shout, without coming out to greet me. One evening, frazzled from a tough day at the restaurant, where nothing had gone right, I returned home to this new routine that was quietly unsettling. After a particularly challenging day at the restaurant, where a waitress had abruptly quit mid-shift, my nerves were frayed. I was in no mood for small talk or delays. I walked into my home expecting the usual, dinner prepared and the table set, the comforting routine we had established. But the house greeted me with an unsettling silence. Brian was nowhere to be seen, not even in his usual haunt, his office. I ventured into the kitchen, where I found a note stuck to the fridge, ordered pizza. 2 beat to cook. Upstairs, the message was devoid of any warmth, no loving sign-off, not even a "see you soon." Disappointment washed over me as I tossed my bag onto the counter, my frustration growing. When the pizza arrived, I ate it there and then, cold and alone in the silence of a kitchen. A couple of days later, I decided it was time to address the growing distance between us. I found Brian in his office, the door slightly open. I knocked and pushed the door wider. He was absorbed in something on his computer and didn't turn to face me. "Hey, can we talk?" I asked, leaning on the door frame. "Sure. What's up?" he replied, eyes still glued to the screen. "It's about the other night and actually the past few weeks. You've been distant. Is everything all right?" I inquired, stepping into the room. He minimized his screen and finally looked at me. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just got a lot on my mind, you know? House stuff, bills, that kind of thing." It sounded like a brushed-off excuse. "Brian, you know you can talk to me, right? If something's bothering you." He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. I said it's nothing. Don't worry about it. But worry I did. It wasn't like him to shut me out. That night, dinner was a quiet affair. He had cooked, but the effort was minimal. No candles, no music, just silence. Driven by a hunch, I came home early one day, earlier than usual given the usual chaos at the restaurant. As I entered, I was surprised by the sound of bustling in the kitchen. I found a middle-aged woman humming as she chopped vegetables. "Who are you?" I blurted out, unable to mask my shock. The woman turned, slightly startled, then smiled. "Oh, hello. You must be Mrs. Deborah Miller. I'm Sarah. I've been helping out around here for about a year now, cooking, cleaning, all the housework. Brian hired me. He said it was too much for him to manage." Too much for him to manage? That was news to me. "Right, I see. Well, keep doing what you're doing, Sarah. I need to sort something out," I said, my mind racing with questions about where Brian had been spending his time if not at home managing things as he claimed. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I stepped outside and dialed the number of a detective agency I had heard about. It was time to uncover what my husband was really up to. A few days later, the detective returned with surprising news. Although part of me felt relieved to learn there was no other woman, the real issue was just as troubling. Brian had been frequenting casinos, accumulating debts as though they were going out of style. That evening, when Brian came home, I was waiting for him, the detective's report in hand. His face fell as he noticed the serious look on mine. "Deborah, what's wrong?" he asked, his keys clattering on the table as he tried to gauge my mood. "Brian, where has our money been going?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. Brian's eyes shifted away, his discomfort visible. "What do you mean?" "Gambling, Brian. Casinos, debts. Does that ring any bells?" I waved the detective's report in front of him. He collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "I was going to tell you. I just needed to sort it out first," he murmured. "By gambling more?" My patience was thinning rapidly. "It's not like that," he protested weakly. "It started small. I thought I could win back what I'd lost, but..." His voice trailed off, his expression miserable. I took a deep breath. This was not the life I envisioned with him. "Brian, you need professional help. And you're going to get it, or we're done," I declared, gesturing to signify the potential end of us. He looked up, tears glossing his eyes. "I'll do anything, Deborah. Please just help me this one time. I promise I'll stop. I'll get treatment." "Fine. But this is your only chance. You're signing a receipt for every penny I spend to clear these debts, and you're starting treatment," I stated resolutely. The next few weeks were a blur. I paid off the debts, which amounted to $200,000. Brian signed every receipt and began his treatment. It was hard watching him struggle, but a part of me felt hopeful that we were finally moving past this nightmare. Months passed, and Brian's recovery seemed on track. We had settled into a new routine, which felt almost normal until one evening. We were sitting on the couch, watching a forgettable TV show when Brian turned to me with a serious expression. "Deborah, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we thought about having a kid," he said cautiously, trying to gauge my reaction. A cold knot formed in my stomach. We had discussed this long before getting married, and he knew my medical situation. "Brian, you know I can't. The doctors have always been clear about the risks. Pregnancy could kill me." My body wouldn't handle it, I reminded him. He nodded, but his nod seemed almost relieved, which didn't sit right with me. I pushed the thought aside as he continued. We need an heir, Deborah. Someone to carry on after us. I laughed, more harshly than I intended. This isn't the medieval times, Brian. It's just us, and my restaurant isn't a kingdom. But he persisted over the next few days, each conversation more forceful than the last. One afternoon, I received a call from his sister Megan, who was an obstetrician at the clinic where I sometimes received treatment. Deborah, Brian tells me you're hesitant about having a child. You should reconsider. With today's medical advancements, it's perfectly safe, she advised. Megan, you've seen my medical files. You know safe is a relative term for someone like me, I replied, my frustration building as I stood in the middle of my kitchen, my phone pressed tightly against my ear. Sometimes you just have to think about more than just yourself. You're just being selfish, she retorted sharply. Selfish? Really? It's my life we're talking about. My health, I snapped, my voice rising. The phone shook in my hand. She didn't apologize. Instead, she hung up, leaving a bitter silence hanging in the air. When Brian came home that evening, he found me still visibly upset. What's got you all worked up? He asked, dropping his keys on the table. Your sister called. She's got opinions about us having a baby, I said, not meeting his eyes as I stirred the pot on the stove more vigorously than necessary. I remember that day distinctly. It was bright and clear, yet a biting chill in the air hinted at something amiss. I arrived home earlier than usual, only to find the scene in my apartment unsettlingly chaotic. There, in my living room, stood Brian, his sister Megan, her husband Gregory, and a collection of boxes. Deborah, good, you're here, Megan announced in a tone that was both firm and cold, as though she was delivering a business report. We're moving in. This is Brian's apartment, and you need to leave. I was dumbfounded. What are you talking about, Megan? This is my home, I responded, my voice barely above a whisper as I tried to process the shock. Brian stepped forward, his expression more severe than I had ever seen. Deborah, I can't do this anymore. You've been controlling and demeaning for years. I've had enough, he declared. His accusation stung like a slap. Controlling? Demeaning? Brian, what are you talking about? It's always been about what you want, what you need. I've been nothing but a servant here, he continued, his voice escalating with every word. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of you, and in return I get nothing but insults. Megan joined in, her voice just as accusatory. We've seen it, Gregory and I. How you treat him. It's time Brian stood up for himself. Brian then shoved a stack of papers toward me, his eyes alight with a mix of anger and what seemed like triumph. I've filed for divorce, Deborah, and I'm seeking compensation for years of emotional labor and abuse. You'll hear from my lawyer. Instead of the outrage they likely expected, a cold calm washed over me. I scanned the apartment, my gaze lingering on Brian and his apparent co-conspirators, realizing there was nothing left for me here. All right, Brian. You'll hear from my lawyer too, I said evenly. Without another word, I retreated to our bedroom. No, my bedroom now, and began to pack a suitcase. Within an hour, I was in my car, driving away from the apartment, from the deceit and betrayal of people I once trusted. I headed to a place I had always known would be my refuge if my world ever crumbled, a luxurious house in an elite cottage village, complete with a specialized clinic nearby. This house, purchased with the foresight of needing immediate and intensive care, represented my true safe haven. As I passed through the gates of the village, the security guards nodded in recognition, a small comfort on a day rife with upheaval. Inside my house, I wandered through the spacious, sunlit rooms, each corner meticulously curated over the years to provide comfort and care, a stark contrast to the cold, calculated home I had just left. I settled onto the plush sofa, chosen specifically for days when my body demanded rest. Lying there, I couldn't help but feel a twisted gratitude towards Brian for revealing his true colors before it was too late. I had prepared for a life of possible solitude from the beginning, and it was this foresight that now comforted me, allowing me to embrace the tranquility of my new sanctuary, undisturbed yet reflective. A few days after settling into my sanctuary, I received a frantic call from Brian. His voice was a blend of panic and fury. "You framed me, Deborah. This is all some sick game to you, isn't it?" he accused as soon as I answered. I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of his claim. "Brian, if there's something you want to discuss, come over." "I'm not playing games, but we can talk," I replied, sending him my new address, my tone calm and stark against his tempest. When Brian, Megan, and her husband Gregory arrived, the guards let them through. From my front porch, I watched them step out of their car, their expressions a mix of shock and awe at the size and grandeur of my home, as if they had stepped into a realm far beyond their expectations. Brian, gathering himself, confronted me. "Your lawyer called. He said I have to pay rent for the apartment, $5,000 next month because you sold it years ago. You planned this all along." I leaned against the door frame, finding his agitation more tiresome than alarming. "Brian, that apartment was a rental property under a company I own. You assumed it was mine to live in, not to own," I explained calmly. He sputtered, frustration evident on his face. "But I put time into that place, cared for it. I deserve compensation. And if you don't give me this house, I'll take you to court." Megan, ever the supporter, piped up, her voice shrill. "And why not? Look at it, Brian. She owes us. Living in luxury while we get nothing but scraps." I laughed, not out of amusement, but because of their sheer audacity. "I bought this house long before I met you, Brian. It's legally untouchable by you or anyone else." Megan was seething, her husband tugging at her arm, trying to coax her back to the car. "This isn't over, Deborah. We'll get what's ours," she hissed. I sighed, motioning to the security guards who had been observing from a distance. "I think it's time for you to leave." As they escorted Brian and his entourage out, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I had the foresight to protect myself, and sorrow for the man I thought I knew and had married. The courtroom scene that followed was tense. The room was packed with curious onlookers and filled with the sharp scent of tension. I sat straight, my hands folded neatly on my lap, as Brian and his lawyer prepared their misguided portrayal of victimhood. "Your Honor, my client has been systematically exploited and emotionally abused by the defendant, forced to endure years of servitude, cooking, cleaning, and subjected to relentless emotional degradation," Brian's lawyer proclaimed, his voice booming across the room. When it was our turn, my lawyer stood, commanding the attention of everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is not a case of exploitation, but rather a calculated attempt to extort my client, a successful businesswoman. We have substantial evidence to prove that Mr. Brian has not only lied about his contributions, but has also deceived my client regarding his activities during their marriage." She then called Sarah, the actual housekeeper who had been doing all the work Brian claimed as his own. Sarah approached the stand, her demeanor calm and honest. "Please tell the court about your employment," my lawyer requested. "I was hired by Mr. Brian Miller to handle all household duties, cleaning, cooking, everything he's claimed to have done himself. I was paid from a separate account which Mr. Miller managed," Sarah testified, her voice steady, revealing the truth behind Brian's claims. Sarah's testimony continued to resonate through the courtroom. "How often did Mrs. Deborah Miller interact with you in terms of household management?" asked my lawyer. "Never," Sarah replied firmly. She was under the impression that her husband was managing everything, as he claimed. The courtroom was filled with murmurs as the reality of Brian's deceit began to unfold. My lawyer then presented the prenuptial agreement, outlining the terms of our marriage and the financial arrangements in case of a divorce. As you can see, the prenup clearly states that in the event of a divorce initiated under such false pretenses, Mr. Brian Miller is entitled to nothing, my lawyer concluded, her tone unwavering. Brian's face went ashen, perhaps realizing at that moment he hadn't fully understood the prenup he had signed. His lawyer fumbled with his notes, his case falling apart before everyone's eyes. The judge reviewed the documents, his expression inscrutable. Then, with decisive finality, he announced, "I find in favor of Mrs. Deborah Miller." The claims against her are unfounded, and the prenuptial agreement stands as valid. The divorce is granted, with no financial compensation to Mr. Brian Miller. Brian slumped back in his seat, utterly defeated. Outside the courthouse, his sister's fury was palpable. "You fool! You couldn't even do this, right? We could have had it all if you'd just convinced her to agree to have a child," she berated him. Days later, Brian appeared at the gates of my elite village, desperation clear on his face. "Deborah, please, I'll do anything. Clean, cook, just let me come back," he pleaded, his voice cracking with despair. I felt nothing but disgust seeing the man I once loved reduced to this state. "Brian, you need to leave now. You're not welcome here," I said firmly. The security guards promptly escorted him out. I watched as he was led away, then blocked his number and all other forms of contact. This chapter of my life was definitively closed. I turned back toward my home, feeling a profound sense of relief and freedom. My life was once again my own, and I was determined to live it to the fullest, unencumbered by the shadows of the past. The tranquility of my sanctuary awaited, a testament to my resilience and foresight. It was time to move forward, embracing the peace and opportunities of my new beginning. My earliest memories are set in a home that felt more like a strict religious order than a family dwelling. My father ruled our modest house with an iron fist, portraying the archetypal patriarch, while my mother played the role of a staunch supporter, echoing his edicts with fervent agreement. "In this world, a woman's strength lies in her ability to listen," Dad would declare, his voice resonating off the walls. Mother would nod in concurrence, her mantra being, "Your power is in your silence, not your speech." I was their sole child, Remy, ensnared in this tight web of restrictions. No friends over, no loud music, and certainly no dissent. Contrasting sharply with my parents, my grandmother breathed fresh air. Living just a few blocks away, she came from a different world altogether. Her visits transformed our home into a place of lightness and freedom. One day, as she tried to sneak me a chocolate bar, Dad sharply rebuked her, emphasizing the need for discipline. But Grandma sharply countered, "Discipline is one thing, Benjamin, but crushing her spirit is another." She never shied away from standing up to him, and their frequent disputes became the background noise of my upbringing. Despite the oppressive environment, there were moments of warmth. My mother taught me cooking, suggesting it was my gateway to a successful marriage, claiming, "A man wants a woman who can feed him well." Meanwhile, Dad's lessons centered around submission, often remarking, "A quiet wife is a happy life," without any irony. I quickly learned to keep my thoughts to myself, and at school, I became the invisible girl, seldom noticed by teachers or peers. Everything changed when I turned 14. Hidden away in my room, Grandma burst in, her eyes alight with determination, and declared, "Pack a bag, Remy. You're coming with me." Despite Dad's vehement protests, Grandma was resolute. "I won't watch you bury her spirit under your rules," she asserted. And with that, I was spirited away to Grandma's house, a stark contrast to my parents' disciplined environment. Grandma's home was a haven of chaos and creativity, filled with books, music, and constant laughter. "Here, you'll learn to speak, to argue, and to be yourself," she promised. For the first time, I dared to imagine a life different from the one I had known. Yet, old habits die hard. Despite her nurturing, the shadows of my childhood loomed large. I remained shy and reserved, finding solace in the anonymity of the internet. Web design became my outlet, a means to express myself silently. Living with Grandma felt like inhabiting an alternate universe. She urged me to find my voice and assert myself, but years of conditioning were hard to overcome. When she proposed introducing me to someone, I instinctively retreated. "He's coming over for dinner next week," she mentioned nonchalantly one day. I paused my spoon midair, filled with apprehension. Why? I managed to ask, my voice a whisper. Because you're 32, living like a hermit. It's time you met someone, she replied firmly, leaving no room for debate. But what if he's like Dad? The question escaped my lips before I could rein it in. Grandma placed her teacup down with a gentle clink, her sigh filling the silence that followed. Not everyone is like your father, Remy. I've known this young man's family for years. He's different. I remained skeptical. And what if I don't like him? What then? Then you don't like him. But you'll try, won't you? Her eyes conveyed a silent plea. Despite my reservations, I nodded. After all, what was the worst that could happen? The day he was supposed to arrive, I was a mess of nerves. I changed my outfit multiple times, paced my room enough to wear down the carpet, and toyed with the idea of feigning sickness. He's here, Grandma announced, her voice tinged with excitement. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I entered the living room. There he stood, somewhat awkwardly near the doorway, holding a bouquet of flowers. He was taller than I'd expected, his eyes kind, and his smile tentative. Hi, I'm Anthony, he introduced himself, offering a handshake. I'm Remy, I managed, my voice a whisper as our hands met. Grandma, ever the gracious host, swept into the room then, brimming with charm. Let's have dinner. Remy has made her famous lasagna. Dinner passed in a blur, mostly led by Grandma's lively chatter. Anthony spoke about his job and his hobbies, which, to my surprise, included plenty of outdoor activities. He was normal, even nice, and he listened, truly listened, when I spoke, which was a rare occurrence. After dinner, we found ourselves alone in the living room, Grandma having excused herself with a knowing wink. So, your grandma tells me you're into web design? Anthony began, breaking the silence. I nodded, grateful for the familiar topic. Yeah, I've been doing it for a few years now. That's cool. I'm hopeless with technology myself, can barely manage my email, he chuckled, and it was an easy, infectious sound. We talked more after that, about everything and nothing. He asked about my work, showed genuine interest in my passion for design, and shared humorous anecdotes about his culinary disasters. The evening was more pleasant than I'd anticipated, and for the first time, I found myself hoping it wouldn't end. After a few more dates, I realized I was falling for him, and it was a feeling like no other, a whirlwind of emotions I'd never experienced. Anthony was everything I never knew I needed. Then came the day he introduced me to his mother. She was polite, though her smile was strained and her eyes scrutinized me as if I were a complex puzzle. It's so nice to finally meet you, Remy. Anthony has told us so much about you, she said, her voice sweet but edged with something I couldn't identify. Thank you, Mrs. Margaret. It's nice to meet you too, I replied, striving for politeness. Our wedding was simple, just as we wanted. However, moving into Anthony's family home brought a sense of déjà vu that unsettled me. It felt like stepping back into the stringent discipline of my childhood. Mrs. Margaret wasted no time in laying down the law, her expectations as towering and unyielding as skyscrapers. The first morning in their house, I awoke to find her already at the kitchen table, presiding over the morning like a queen holding court. Good morning, I mumbled, still groggy. Morning, dear. Now listen, we have a way of doing things around here. You'll start by taking over the kitchen duties, breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, and dinner at 7. And I expect the house to be spotless, she declared, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. The familiar weight of expectations settled over me once again as I nodded, wondering how I'd navigate this new chapter with the echoes of my past so resonantly present. As I acknowledged her command, a lump swelled in my throat. Just then, Anthony drifted through the kitchen, delivering a quick kiss on my cheek. Thanks, babe. Mom's a great teacher. You'll pick up a lot from her, he commented breezily as if endorsing an innocuous routine rather than my daily ordeal. My mornings began in the dim pre-dawn light, striving to assemble a breakfast that might, just once, satisfy her exacting standards. After the morning's culinary challenge, I'd rush to catch up on my web design projects, the hours melding into a relentless cycle of domestic chores interwoven with my professional tasks. Evenings were reserved for dinner prep, catering to Anthony, who arrived home with his own set of expectations. Mrs. Margaret relegated herself to overseeing my efforts, her critiques sharp and frequent, pointing out any overlooked dust or an improperly washed dish. Compliments were an alien concept to her. Her language was criticism, each remark sharper than the last. The revelation of my earnings from web design worsened matters significantly. Suddenly, my income was thrust into the family pot. "You're part of this family now, Remy. It makes sense for you to contribute to the household," Anthony declared, extending his hand expectantly for my bank card. "I already contribute. I cook and clean," I protested, but he interrupted dismissively. "Yeah, but money is different. It's for the household, for us." His voice left no room for counterarguments, and from that moment, my earnings were redirected into his account. The money I earned, through hours spent designing websites and managing demanding clients, was no longer my own. The stark contrast between my financial independence and this new dependency gnawed at me. Despite earning well, I was reduced to asking for money to cover basic expenses. "I need some money for the market tomorrow," I would say timidly, hating every moment of the request. "How much?" he would ask, suspicion lacing his tone as if I were plotting an elaborate escape. "Just enough for this week's groceries and some cleaning supplies," I would reply, striving to keep my voice steady. He would hand me a limited amount of cash, always insufficient, ensuring I would have to ask again, a tactic to keep me dependent and controlled. This was not the life I had envisioned on my wedding day. I found myself caught in a relentless cycle of servitude, my earnings fueling a household that showed no respect for me, under the watchful eye of a mother-in-law who treated me more like hired help than family, and a husband who endorsed her every word. After months of this relentless routine, the day the pasta overcooked was the tipping point. Mrs. Margaret's scathing critique came swiftly. "This mush is what you call dinner?" I stood there, feeling diminished, more an admonished child than a wife. "Sorry, it just got away from me," I murmured. "Got away from you," she snorted as if I had said the most absurd thing. Anthony parroted her disdain. "Remy, you've been off your game. What's going on?" Their words stung sharply. Here I was, squeezing web design into any scrap of time I had, only to be chastised for a trivial mistake. "I'm doing the best I can," I insisted, though it felt like speaking to a brick wall. "Best? This?" Anthony's laugh was short and scornful. That night, I realized it wasn't just about the overcooked pasta. It was about me, about how I was losing myself in my desperate attempts to please them. As I sat at my computer, my fingers flew across the keyboard, spilling my heart onto a web design forum, a place that now served as my confessional. Articulating my frustrations felt like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A fellow forum regular, Jess, responded with an insight that stopped me in my tracks. "This sounds like psychological abuse, Remy. Have you ever read up on it?" Psychological abuse? The term echoed in my mind long into the night as I scoured articles and personal stories, each narrative mirroring parts of my own life in hauntingly familiar ways. By morning, when my grandma called, I couldn't find the strength to lay bare the full extent of my struggles. "Just having a bit of a tough time," I told her, understating the turmoil within. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Grandma's voice carried her concern across the miles. "I know, Grandma. I'm just sorting a few things out. Nothing major," I lied, the guilt of my deception heavy on my conscience. I couldn't stand the thought of her worrying about me. After our call, I dove deeper into the study of psychological abuse, hiding the books from Anthony and his mother. Each page turned was like fitting another piece into the puzzle of my twisted reality, revealing more about the manipulation and control exerting its grip on me. I kept my newfound knowledge to myself, especially from Grandma. I didn't want to burden her with how dire things had gotten. But then, everything changed. One day, as I stepped out for some groceries, a brief reprieve from the stifling atmosphere at home, I was blindsided by a car. The impact was immediate and total. Everything went black. Waking up in the hospital, swathed in bandages and casts, I was disoriented and scared, yet relieved to be alive. That relief vanished the moment Anthony and his mother burst into my hospital room. Their faces were contorted not with concern, but with anger. Great, just great. I've had to cook for myself because of this. What were you thinking? Anthony's voice was a venomous snarl. And I'm stuck cleaning up. You better not be planning to lay around here for long, his mother added, her so-called compassion as cold as ever. I stared at them, pain and disbelief mingling within me. I was hit by a car. I have fractures. I can't just get up. An excuse. Always excuses with you, Anthony interrupted harshly. When will you stop pretending and start pulling your weight again? Their harshness was nearly too much to bear, but something inside me strengthened over the past weeks of secret study and silent acknowledgement of my situation, refused to break. The doctor entered at that moment, his expression strictly professional. Anthony demanded, "How long before she's back on her feet? We have a household to run." The doctor glanced at my chart, then back at them. "She needs at least 3 months of rest. After that, we'll talk about rehabilitation. It won't be quick." Their outrage was almost palpable. 3 months? And who's going to pay for all this? Anthony's faux concern was almost comical. He turned to me, his words cutting deep. "If you think you're going to take it easy at our expense, you're mistaken. If you're not back in a month, cooking and cleaning, we're done." That's when a miraculous clarity crystallized within me, and a calm, unwavering voice I barely recognized as my own responded, "Then we're done. I want a divorce." The room fell deathly silent. Anthony's face drained of color, and his mother looked as if she'd bitten into a bitter lemon. "She must have hit her head too hard," she muttered to her son, disbelief tainting her voice. They left soon after, their departure as dramatic as their entrance, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a newfound sense of freedom. Recovery was going to be a grueling process, but for the first time in a long time, it was a journey I was ready to undertake on my terms. Gaining clarity and devising a plan were the gifts my ordeal had surprisingly bestowed upon me. When Anthony arrived at the hospital, brandishing the divorce papers with a smug certainty plastered across his face, he anticipated a breakdown from me, a desperate plea for him to stay. Instead, with a composed resolve, I took the pen with my unbroken right hand and signed my name with a steadiness that even I didn't expect. "You'll be back," he sneered with overconfident arrogance as he left my belongings and laptop by the bed, a parting symbol of his dismissal. Yet, far from feeling abandoned, I felt a wave of liberation wash over me. I was finally free. In the weeks that followed, I returned to my grandmother's home. She welcomed me back with open arms, no questions asked, no judgments made. Her support helped me rediscover strengths I never knew I possessed. But the peace was short-lived. Soon enough, Anthony and his mother appeared on Grandma's doorstep, waving legal papers and demanding explanations, as if they had any right to intrude into my life again. "You can't just sue us." Anthony blustered, a mix of fury and fear in his voice. "On what grounds?" I countered, my voice calm but firm. "Psychological abuse, for starters. And for taking my earnings without my consent. I have recordings, Anthony. Everything," I stated flatly. The color drained from his face. "Recordings? Remy, please, you don't understand. This could ruin me," he stammered, panic rising. His mother, tears streaming down her face, joined in. "Please, we didn't mean any harm. You have to forgive us." It was almost surreal, seeing them so desperate, so fearful. For months, they had made me feel diminished and powerless, but now the roles were reversed. "No," I declared, my voice unwavering. "I want you both out of my life for good." As they retreated, Grandma looked at me with a mix of awe and pride. "I never knew you had it in you," she said. "Neither did I, Grandma," I admitted, "but I do now." After sending Anthony and his mother away, I was filled with a tumult of emotions, yet above all, there was a triumphant feeling. I had confronted them and turned their deceit and malice back on them. The impending court date loomed, but I was ready, armed with irrefutable evidence and a newfound resolve. The courtroom was a daunting space, its high ceilings amplifying every whispered word and shuffle of feet. Anthony appeared, visibly less confident, his mother beside him, her usual harsh demeanor softened into apparent fear. As the proceedings began, my lawyer, a sharp-witted woman with a no-nonsense approach, presented our case meticulously. Anthony's lawyer attempted to mitigate the evidence, painting him as a misunderstood husband who had been unfairly accused. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the judge, Anthony, and the entire room, my voice steady and clear. Your Honor, I thought I was living in a loving home, but it turned into a prison. The psychological abuse, the control over my finances, I have proof of all of it, I stated. Anthony's lawyer interrupted, Your Honor, these accusations are exaggerated. My client has always had the best intentions. I couldn't suppress a scoff. Best intentions don't involve secretly recording conversations and controlling every aspect of someone's life. The judge silenced the room, reviewed the evidence I provided, the recordings, bank statements, and messages, and after a seemingly endless wait, he looked up. It's clear to this court that Mrs. Margaret has suffered significant psychological abuse at the hands of Mr. Margaret and his mother. The evidence is compelling and supports her claims fully. The judgment was decisively in my favor. Not only was the divorce granted, but the vindication was profound. It was more than a legal victory. It was a reclaiming of my voice and my life. After the court ruled in my favor, Anthony and his mother were required to pay damages and reimburse every cent they had taken from me. Standing outside the courthouse, Grandma embraced me tightly. I'm so proud of you, she whispered softly. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as if I could finally start anew. News of the court's decision spread quickly, as it tends to in both small towns and large cities. Anthony's reputation swiftly deteriorated, and he became a pariah in the community. His bosses demoted him due to the unwelcome scrutiny, and his clients, one after another, disappeared, eager to distance themselves from a man now known for mistreating his wife. His mother, once a formidable presence in her social circles, found herself isolated as friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, leaving her to stew in her bitterness alongside a son whose life she had helped disrupt. As I embarked on this new chapter, I was determined to face the shadows of my past directly. Before even thinking about packing or searching for a new place by the coast, I found myself in the office of a psychologist, Dr. Micah. It was a step I had never imagined taking, but there I was, prepared to unravel the complexities of my life. Dr. Micah's office was a sanctuary, a serene space filled with books and plants, sunlight streaming through the windows. So, what's been going on? She asked during our first session, her voice both gentle and direct. I exhaled, a mix of nerves and relief flooding through me, grateful to finally speak to someone capable of guiding me through the chaos. My whole life's been about pleasing others, staying quiet, being the good girl. And then my marriage, it was more of the same, but much worse, I confessed. We'll take it one step at a time, Dr. Micah assured me, her voice steady and comforting. Those sessions with Dr. Micah became my haven, a place where I could confront my fears and my past, and begin the healing process. It was hard, certainly, but absolutely necessary. Gradually, I felt myself regaining control of my narrative for the first time. One crisp morning, over breakfast, Grandma and I discussed my future plans. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the maps and brochures spread out on the table. So, where to first? Grandma asked, her eyes twinkling with excitement and a hint of mischief. I'm thinking the coast. I've always wanted to live near the ocean, I mused, spreading jam on my toast. Fresh start, fresh scenery. Sounds lovely. And work? Going back to web design? She inquired, sipping her tea. I nodded. Yeah, but on my terms this time. Freelance, maybe. Pick up some new skills along the way. Who knows? The sky's the limit. Grandma chuckled. Just don't go skydiving on me, okay? My heart can't take it. No promises, I teased, earning a playful swat with a napkin. The laughter, the easy banter, it was healing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, packing up, bidding farewell to the few friends I had made, and preparing for the move. Leaving the safety of Grandma's home was bittersweet, but the thrill of a new beginning was intoxicating. The day I left for the coast, Grandma hugged me tightly at the doorstep. "Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you're never alone," she reminded me, her words a comforting echo in my heart as I set off on my new adventure. "I'll remember," I promised, my voice thick with emotion as I hugged Grandma goodbye. "Thank you for everything." As I drove away, I resisted the urge to look back. The road ahead, with its myriad twists and turns, seemed to promise new adventures and new stories. Settling into my new coastal town was like taking a deep, rejuvenating breath. The ocean became a steadfast companion, its roars and whispers soothing my soul with the rhythmic cadence of the tides. I found a quaint studio apartment perched just close enough to the water to afford me a mesmerizing view, my little slice of paradise. Starting anew was not without its challenges. Establishing a new routine, finding work, and making friends required a proactive effort. But for the first time in what felt like forever, it felt like I was living for myself. Each decision I made was aimed at bringing joy into my life. I immersed myself in the world of freelance web design, leveraging my skills to carve out a path to independence. Work was more than just steady, it was enriching. I began collaborating with clients who not only respected my expertise, but also valued my input. This new professional environment was a stark contrast to the days when I felt belittled and undermined. Now, I was not only acknowledged but appreciated, and every project completed added a little more to my sense of self-worth and accomplishment. I'm Quinn, and I'd like to share the story of my life, how it began so wonderfully and then shifted in ways I never saw coming. I was married to Kevin, a relaxed man who inherited a quaint Italian restaurant from his father. We settled into a cozy house left to me by my grandmother. It was here that we began our family, welcoming our son, Frank. In the early years, Kevin and I would spend evenings on our back porch after Frank was asleep. We dreamed together about our future, saving up for a bigger house, perhaps having another child. Kevin always envisioned it with a beer in his hand, while I thought about giving Frank the best possible education, hoping he could attend college without the burden of student loans like I had. Life was simple and joyful, but over time, as I advanced in my career, Kevin seemed satisfied with just maintaining the status quo at the restaurant. It remained cozy but struggled to bring in enough revenue. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, I broached the subject of enhancing the restaurant. "Kevin, have you considered adding new items to the menu or maybe some updates to bring in more customers?" I asked. Kevin, scrubbing a plate a bit too vigorously, replied indifferently, "Why fix what isn't broken? We're doing fine." "But we could be doing so much better," I countered, drying my hands on a towel. Kevin slammed the plate down, frustration evident. "Why are you always pushing? Can't you just be happy with what we have?" "I'm tired of you always wanting more," he exclaimed. I dropped the conversation, but it wasn't just the restaurant that was an issue. As I became the orthodontist, tensions rose. Kevin spent more days at the restaurant, not really working, just avoiding home, and often he would end up at his mother Anna's house. One day, after he spent another evening at his mother's, I confronted him. "You ran off to your mom's again last night, Kevin. When you're there, who do you think manages everything here?" I asked. He rolled his eyes and tossed his keys on the table. "Oh, come off it, Mom understands me, and she doesn't nag me about money or working more," he retorted. That hurt, especially since I had been covering his shortfalls, even sending $900 monthly to Anna to help her out. It was becoming increasingly difficult to manage all our bills and expenses. Later that week, I called Anna to explain our financial strain and the need for Kevin to contribute more. "Anna, I'm doing what I can, but Kevin needs to step up. We're struggling," I explained. Rather than showing understanding, Anna became defensive. "Quinn, you're his wife. It's your job to support him, not push him around. You're always after my boy to change. Can't you see you're the problem?" she accused. Anger welled up inside me. "I am supporting him, Anna, more than you know. I even send you money every month. How can you call me the problem? You're calling me a gold digger? I'm the one counting every penny to keep us afloat, I replied, her words stinging before she abruptly hung up. As night fell, I pondered over our conversation, feeling both frustrated and saddened by the turn our lives had taken. I watched Kevin slump onto the sofa, a beer in his grasp, absorbed in his phone. Meanwhile, I tucked Frank into bed, the day's conversation with his mother weighing heavily on my shoulders. Life at home had become increasingly challenging since Kevin's restaurant fell on hard times. He had been forced to let his staff go one by one until it was just him, alone, making pizzas in a quiet part of town. Even then, the business dwindled to the point where it couldn't keep the lights on. The day he closed the restaurant for good, he returned home looking utterly defeated, yet there was a defiant glint in his eyes. This isn't the end. It's merely a setback, he said, trying to maintain composure as he hung up his apron for the last time. I sat at the kitchen table, bills scattered around like a spread of ominous cards. A setback, Kevin? The restaurant is closed. We need a new income source, and we need it now, I replied. His pride took a hit, and he bristled. I'll find something, but I won't just take any job. I have my standards. I was a business owner, and what does that mean now, Kevin? We need actual money, not standards, I countered, my frustration boiling over. He just shook his head, muttering about not becoming a desk jockey. I have a degree, Quinn. I'm aiming for a managerial position, nothing less. I was stunned by his audacity. Your business just tanked, and you think you can land a top job just like that? I snapped, unable to mask the irritation in my voice. He didn't respond, just stormed out, likely heading to his mother's place. That's how things went now. Whenever it got tough, Kevin disappeared. The weekend brought no relief, only his mother Anna crashing in with her demands. She arrived just as I was preparing lunch, her timing as flawless as her audacity. Quinn, you need to talk to your bosses. Get Kevin a good position at your company. He deserves it, she insisted, as if it were the simplest solution. I let out a harsh, short laugh. Anna, that's not how it works. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. They don't just hand out top jobs because I ask. She narrowed her eyes, her lips thinning. You just don't want him to succeed, afraid he might overshadow you, huh? I explained calmly, despite the rising tension. Seriously, Anna, Kevin walking into a senior role with no experience isn't going to happen. It's not about fear. It's about reality. Lunch continued under a cloud of chilliness, Kevin silent, likely ruminating over his bruised ego and his mother's words. Kevin's days turned into a blur of inertia, lounging with his beer and phone while I managed work, house chores, and caring for our son Frank. Each evening, I returned home to a chaotic house and no dinner in sight. Kevin, could you at least start dinner? I'm running on fumes here, I would say, dropping my bags and kicking off my shoes. He'd grunt, eyes glued to his phone. You do it better. I'm tired too, you know. It infuriated me to see him so idle, especially when Frank, hungry and expectant, would tug at my sleeve. And Kevin, did you pick him up from school today? One evening, already aware of the answer, I asked Kevin if he had forgotten to tell me something. His reply was a low mumble, barely audible over the television. Thankfully, my mother, who lived close by, had stepped in as a reliable backup since Kevin had begun neglecting even his most basic duties. Kevin, he's your son too. He needs you, I stated, striving to keep my voice calm, though it was challenging. Typically, this would be the moment he'd leave, the door slamming as he went, marking another routine day. True to form, he vanished, leaving me to manage everything alone. The pattern escalated when I noticed money missing from my wallet. Initially, it was just a few dollars, but soon entire bills were gone. One night, after confirming the missing money, I confronted him. Kevin, have you been taking money from my purse? His eyes darted away before meeting mine again. Needed some cash for beer, he admitted. Beer? You're taking cash like a thief now, I exclaimed. How dare you call me a thief? I'm your husband, he retorted, his voice rising. Before we could argue further, Anna burst in. It seemed she had overheard us, her expression stormy. Quinn, all you care about is money. Can't you see the man is struggling? You should be supporting him, not accusing him. Support him by letting him steal from me? What about Frank? What about our bills? I responded, my voice growing louder as the stress from the past months reached a boiling point. Kevin collapsed back on the couch, tuning out as Anna and I argued over him, his eyes fixed on a distant point. The argument ended in a heavy silence, with Anna storming out and Kevin remaining silent and inactive. When Frank fell ill as the summer ended, his fever spiking one night, no soothing or cool cloths seemed to help. Sitting beside his bed, thermometer in hand, I felt my heart sink with each beep confirming the fever wasn't breaking. Kevin, as usual, was no help, engrossed in his phone on the couch. Kevin, can you check if we have any more fever reducer? I asked, trying to stay composed. He grunted and slowly got up, but I knew it would be quicker to do it myself. Frank was softly whimpering, clutching my hand, each moment precious. After a quick kiss on his forehead, I rushed to the kitchen myself. The next morning, the doctor stressed the need for medication and tests. Better to be safe, he advised, noting down his recommendations. Tests meant more expenses, far beyond what was left after the bills and Kevin's unchecked spending. Heart pounding, I transferred the last of our savings for Frank's treatment, including the $900 usually reserved for Anna. It was the only way. No sooner had I made the decision, Anna stormed in, furious. Quinn, where's my money? It's the first of the month, she demanded. I was repacking Frank's small backpack, ready for another doctor's visit. Anna, I began, bracing myself for another confrontation. I had to allocate the funds for Frank. He's gravely ill and needs them for his medical examinations and treatments. Anna's gaze hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval. Do you really expect me to believe you don't have other money? That was my money, Quinn. I need it, she declared. I took a step back, raising my hands defensively as my maternal instinct surged. Frank is my priority. He's just a child, he's unwell, and he needs his mother to look after him. I won't apologize for putting him first. Well, I should have guessed you'd do something like this, holding money back for me for that boy. Anna spat the words with venom, as if they were a poison that pained her. That boy, Anna? That's your grandson. How can you be so heartless? I shot back, my patience wearing thin. I don't need a lecture from you, Quinn. Just make sure you pay me by tomorrow, or you'll regret it, she hissed, anger twisting her features. Her threat lingered ominously in the air, but the sight of Frank, weak and delicate in the next room, fortified my resolve. Leave my house now, Anna. I won't tolerate threats under my own roof. Not today, not ever. Anna seemed poised to argue further, but the firm resolve in my gaze silenced her. She stormed out, slamming the door, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Kevin left quietly after her. I went back to Frank, my hands trembling as I gently stroked his hair. He looked up at me with trusting, pain-filled eyes. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here, I whispered, kissing his forehead, my resolve hardening. The days became a blur of hospital visits and sleepless nights. Kevin's absence was a quiet relief, no more arguments or scornful glances. But after a week of strained calm, I sensed something was wrong one Monday afternoon. Checking my bank app, my heart sank as I saw large withdrawals had nearly drained our savings. Panic clenched my chest as I scrolled through the transaction history, each withdrawal a betrayal. Calling Kevin was futile. He hadn't answered in days. Resolutely, I blocked the card to halt his theft. Amidst the turmoil, I realized the depth of Kevin's selfishness. A week after he disappeared, Kevin returned, not alone but with Anna at his side. They found me amidst a chaos of Frank's toys and medical bills scattered on the living room floor. Quinn, we have news, Kevin declared, a strange smirk on his face. I won the lottery, $27 million. And no, you won't see a cent of it. I'm filing for divorce. The room seemed to spin. What about Frank? I managed to utter. Anna's laugh was chilling. Oh, Quinn, always the martyr. You've underestimated my son for too long. Now he's wealthy, and you're nothing. He'll find someone better, someone younger. Kevin nodded, picking up a duffel bag by the door. Yeah, I'm moving out to live with Mom. You'll manage on your own, won't you? Anna was exceptionally skilled at manipulation, wrapping her arm around Kevin and leading him to the exit. Let's leave the gold digger to wallow in her chaos. We have far better places to be, she suggested smugly as the door slammed shut behind them. The reality of the moment struck me hard. Betrayal, abandonment, theft. Kevin had deserted me, leaving behind only heartache and immense challenges. Yet, as the initial shock began to subside, a fiery determination started to grow within me. They thought they could destroy me, render me broken and penniless. I was resolved not to let that happen. With a steady voice, I called my lawyer. Kevin used our shared funds to purchase that lottery ticket. I want to contest the winnings, I declared. My lawyer, though cautious, was supportive. It's going to be a tough battle, Quinn, but we'll put our all into this, he assured me. Hanging up the phone, I felt the weight of the upcoming struggle settle on my shoulders. Yet, there was a newfound strength in me, tempered by this betrayal. For myself, for our son Frank, I was ready to fight, not just for survival this time, but for justice. As the court hearing neared, my lawyer, Mr. Adam, and I were engulfed in a whirlwind of preparation. We meticulously compiled every shred of evidence, bank statements, financial records, anything that demonstrated how I had financially supported our home while Kevin contributed nothing. Quinn, it's a solid case. The fact that he used your bank card to buy the lottery ticket is our strongest point, Mr. Adam reassured me as we sat amid stacks of paperwork in his office. With the court date looming, tension simmered just beneath the surface of my everyday routine. Then, just 4 days before the hearing, Kevin and Anna made an unexpected appearance. I was in the kitchen, Frank playing at my feet, when I heard the car door slam. They burst through the front door, their faces red with fury. You're really going through with this? Suing your own husband? Kevin bellowed, his voice echoing through the small room. Anna quickly joined in, her tone sharp and spiteful. Greedy. That's what you are, trying to claim what isn't yours. I stood firm, feeling Frank press against my leg for comfort. It's not just Kevin's money. He bought the ticket with our joint funds that I provided because he wasn't contributing. I countered calmly, the anger from their accusations fueling my resolve. Kevin's face contorted with disdain. It's not about control, Kevin. It's about fairness. You left, remember? You and your mother mocked me, said I'd be left with nothing. Their shouts could have escalated further, but I was determined not to let that happen in front of Frank. You need to leave now. We'll settle this in court, I said firmly. Their departure was loud and chaotic, but once they were gone, the house felt somehow clearer, purer. I hugged Frank close, whispering reassurances that everything would be all right. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Kevin sat across from us, his lawyer whispering in his ear, while Anna glared at me with hostility. When Mr. Adam presented the bank statements and financial records, the evidence was undeniable. Each time Kevin's attorney stumbled over a question, I felt the wave of triumph. The judge paid close attention, his gaze fixed on Kevin as evidence of Kevin's financial reliance on me unfolded. Key to the case was the lottery ticket bought with money from our joint account, making it a marital asset, as Mr. Adam persuasively argued. Kevin raised his voice in the hushed courtroom. I was the one who bought the ticket. It was my decision, my luck. But the judge quickly retorted, not your money, Mr. Thompson, and unfortunately for you, luck does not supersede the law. After prolonged deliberations, the judge handed down his decision. It was clear from the presented evidence that Mr. Thompson was financially dependent on Mrs. Thompson during the purchase of the ticket, thereby deeming the ticket a marital asset. The judgment awarded 4/4 of the lottery winnings to Mrs. Thompson and 1/4 to Mr. Thompson. Both Kevin and Anna were visibly shocked, their faces a canvas of disbelief. Months later, after the dust settled and the divorce was finalized, I began to embrace a brighter future shaped by the court's decision. Aware of the tales of lottery winners who squandered their fortunes, I reached out to Ethan, an old college friend who had found success in finance, for guidance. Over coffee, we discussed strategic investments in technology and renewable energy, as well as setting aside funds for my son Frank's education. Ethan's advice proved invaluable. Meanwhile, Kevin and Anna's approach to their share of the winnings became town gossip. Kevin flaunted a new sports car, while Anna indulged in lavish jewelry and attire, reveling in her newfound lifestyle. One afternoon, while picking up Frank from school, a friend eagerly relayed the latest about Kevin's extravagant purchases and Anna's luxurious living. I merely smiled and shifted my focus back to Frank and our future. At home, I meticulously planned our finances with Ethan's assistance. Each investment decision reinforced a pathway towards stability and security, ensuring Frank would have every possible advantage. One evening, Frank's curiosity about college mirrored my aspirations for him, his eyes alight with dreams and potential. As our lives settled into a comforting routine, with Frank flourishing in school and our investments thriving, the past seemed firmly behind us. Yet, life has a way of revisiting us, as I soon learned through an unsettling update from a close friend. During a relaxed coffee meetup, I chatted with Quinn about some startling news. Kevin had fallen on hard times. He'd lost his car, his money, and was caught up in gambling debts so deep that they even injured his neck. Over my coffee, I concealed my shock. "Really? That's unfortunate," I commented. And then there was Anna. She had started to sell her jewelry, desperate as both she and Kevin faced their darkest days after years of flaunting their wealth. Quinn, shaking her head in disbelief, recounted these developments. Before long, Kevin appeared at my doorstep, a mere shadow of the man he once was. His luxurious attire was gone, replaced by faded jeans and a worn jacket. His eyes, which once sparkled with pride, now reflected desperation. "Quinn, can we talk?" His voice was hoarse, as if he had rehearsed his plea countless times. I hesitated but stepped aside, allowing him into the house. Frank was out with friends, so we had the house to ourselves. I wasn't eager for a lengthy visit, though. As he entered, Kevin took a lingering look around the living room. "I've lost everything, Quinn. The money, the car. I've got nothing left. And I miss my family. I miss you," he confessed. Raising an eyebrow, I replied skeptically, "You miss the money. That's what you miss." "No, it's more than that. I've been reflecting a lot lately. I was hoping, maybe, we could start anew." His eyes pleaded for a second chance, but all I could recall were the years of deceit and neglect. I scoffed, more in disbelief than humor. "Start over? After everything you've put us through? You leave, accuse me of being materialistic, squander your wealth, and now you want to return as if nothing happened?" He avoided my gaze, his discomfort evident. "I know I've made grave mistakes, Quinn. I truly realize that now, and I'm ready to change," he insisted. "Kevin, you left when you thought you were better off without us. That revealed your true character. Now, you're just regretful because you're penniless and alone," I said, my voice resolute. Deflated, he absorbed the weight of my words. "So, there's no chance for us?" he asked softly. "Kevin, I forgave you long ago, for my own peace, not so you could waltz back into our lives when you hit rock bottom. Frank and I are thriving, and I intend to keep it that way," I affirmed. With a heavy heart, he left, shoulders slumped. Watching him walk away, I felt a chapter in my life close definitively. Later, as I picked up Frank, his laughter filled the car, affirming the true richness in our lives. No lottery win could ever match the genuine, invaluable love and joy we shared. Our path hadn't been smooth, but it was uniquely ours, brimming with irreplaceable, authentic affection.